Chapter 944. Zhuge Kongming's workshop wasn't as big as imagined, but upon closer inspection, it wasn't small at all. However, Zhuge Kongming's semicircular workshop was quite attractive. The semicircular magic workshop gave people the feeling that the sky was like a bamboo hat, and the ground was like a plate. It was filled with the aura of ancient China, as if they had come from Mesopotamia to ancient China in an instant. The entire workshop's floor was covered with neat green stones, and the domed ceiling was also decorated. There wasn't a trace of soil in sight. It was simply a neat stone room, and it made people's eyes light up. Zhuge Kongming's workshop didn't have much in it, except for a few huge stones and a stone platform in the middle. The huge stones were arranged in a circular pattern in the middle. Upon closer inspection, there were exactly 8 of them, and they were arranged in the shape of the 8 trigrams. In the middle, there was a platform in black and white. On the platform was a strange machine that looked like a modern cannon-shaped weapon, but it was much larger than modern military cannons. The maximum length of the machine was at least 20 meters. Most importantly, this strange machine was so gorgeous that it didn't look like a weapon at all. It looked more like a precious treasure that had been lost to the world. What is this? Gadotsi was shocked. Could this thing that looked like a cannon be some kind of important device? A weapon? Or is this a necessity for Mr. Kongming's workshop? Matthew asked. It was obvious that Gadotsi and Matthew were really interested in this. Taking a closer look at the cannon, the body of the cannon was just a support that could move the barrel up and down. The support supported a long, cannon-like object. The entire cannon barrel could be said to occupy 90% of the entire machine. The current inclination of the barrel was 20 degrees, and it was almost level with the ground. The support under the barrel could be used to adjust the angle of the barrel. Although the support couldn't make the barrel tilt 90 degrees, 67 degrees was not a problem. If it was a weapon, it could be used as a super long-range weapon. At the end of the barrel, there was a round cover that could be opened. The entire barrel gradually became thinner from the back to the front. At the muzzle, there was not a pitch-black hole, but a sharp spike. The spike was as long as 3 meters. It looked like a long spear, and it was quite slender, which made it extremely terrifying. However, when matched with the barrel that was over 20 meters long, the 3-meter muzzle was actually nothing. It was just that the 3-meter-long muzzle was quite terrifying. If it was shorter, it would probably look like the tip of a ballpoint pen or an electric soldering iron. However, no matter how long it was hard to believe that this machine was a long-range weapon. Other things aside, the spikes at the muzzle looked like they were used to stab or ram, but it would be too strange to call it a battering ram. But unfortunately, it was indeed a weapon. Dr. Gadotsi and Matthew asked Roman, who was in charge of Chaldea and had the knowledge of the database. Ahem, this. Roman's answer was stuttering, and it was obvious that he didn't know. This is the seal of divinity, Dinger, Wuming answered Gadotsi and Matthew on behalf of Roman. Dinger. Gadotsi and Matthew nodded thoughtfully. However, Gadotsi asked his question in a serious manner. By the way, assassin, what is the seal of divinity, Dinger? This time, Gilgamesh answered Gadotsi before Wuming could. It's a weapon used to launch this king's treasure, using the instantaneous magic power as a cannonball. Treasure. Matthew and Gadotsi were a little confused. Could it be that just gold and silver could be used as a cannonball? Would it be weak? The two of them were full of doubts as they had never seen a cannonball being launched. However, it was indeed so. After all, the treasure of this era seemed a little difficult for Gadotsi and Matthew to understand. At that moment, Wuming simply explained to the two of them. To put it simply, it's actually a treasure that can be called a noble phantasm. It's loaded and launched as a cannonball. Noble phantasm. The reason why Wuming said so was because it was easy to understand a noble phantasm. When Wuming said so, Gadotsi and Matthew instantly understood. Both of their eyes were full of disbelief. Did it have to be so extravagant? Not only Gadotsi and Matthew, but Roman was also shocked. Noble phantasm. Is this the so-called collapse of fantasy? It's such a waste. Roman sighed helplessly from Gadotsi's bracelet. Noble phantasm was the crystallization of humans' fantasy. It was not a problem to call it the collapse of fantasy. After hearing what Roman said, Gadotsi and Matthew agreed with Roman, which was rare. I see. It's indeed a very appropriate description. Matthew nodded in agreement. It's rare for the doctor to say something that's right. Roman was a little sad about what Gadotsi said. However, he had been through a lot and gradually got used to it. Using a noble phantasm as a cannonball and launching it to cause an explosion. Theoretically, it could cause a lot of damage, but is it really okay to be so wasteful? Roman was once again worried about Gilgamesh's reckless waste. Humph. Human history is a waste of history. If that's the case, this king's phantasm should be used this way. Gilgamesh's courage let Gadotsi and Mashu once again witness Gilgamesh's excellent side. He's indeed the most ancient hero king. Matthew once again praised Gilgamesh in a serious manner. If it were me, I would probably be very reluctant. Gadotsi smiled embarrassedly. Isn't that obvious? The only one who can easily do this is this king, who has all the treasures in this world. Ha ha ha. Gilgamesh laughed happily. This made Wuming shake his head helplessly again. The king would not hesitate to accept the compliments and be happy because it was an affirmation of the king. King Gilgamesh, it's time for you to explain the mission that you've given to Zhuge Kongming. Although that was what Wuming said, Wuming could almost guess it. After all, the divine right seal, Dinger, on the stone platform in front of them was obviously different from the one that Wuming knew. When Wuming saw the divine right seal, Dinger, he understood the mission that Gilgamesh had given to Zhuge Kongming. It was probably to modify the divine right seal, Dinger. It's just as you think, Qianryong. This king has given the military counselor the task of modifying the divine right seal, Dinger. Chapter 945. King Gilgamesh's seal of divine right, Dinger, is a weapon that uses the magic power generated by the destruction of treasures to cause large-scale damage. Although this weapon has a very obvious effect on killing demonic beasts, its effect on the commander of the demonic beasts is negligible. Zhuge Kongming stepped forward and explained to everyone. Ordinary magical beasts wouldn't be that much stronger even if they were strengthened. However, magical beast commanders were different. Dinger's bombardment couldn't cause the slightest bit of damage to magical beast commanders. The most it could do was burn off some of its fur and scrape off some of its scales. In the face of demons with extremely strong physiques, Gilgamesh entrusted me to modify the seal of divine authority into a weapon that could kill them with a single blow. Therefore, I modified the muzzle of the seal of divine authority into a concentrated cannon. Originally, the seal of divine authority used King Gilgamesh's treasures as bullets and fired them in the form of bullets. Now, it has been converted into a continuous laser radiation. After hitting the target, the energy will spread throughout the target's body and destroy the target's molecular structure. In other words, the seal of divine authority, which was originally an area of effect weapon, had been modified by Zhuge Kongming into a single-target weapon. So that's how it is. It's specially designed to deal with demons. Gadotsi then contacted Roman. Doctor, what do you think? Roman, who was in Chaldea, tapped on the keyboard in front of him. Obviously, he was examining and analyzing the seal of divine authority in front of Gadotsi. The muzzle of the seal of divine authority has indeed been converted into a concentrated cannon. However, because Chaldea does not have any specific data on demons, I have no way of determining whether it will be effective against them. You don't have to do it. This king can determine that the new seal of divine authority will definitely be effective against demons. It seemed that Gilgamesh was full of confidence in the new seal of divine authority. He did not know whether it was because he believed in his own judgment or Zhuge Kongming's technology. King Gilgamesh is sensible. After all, it took me 3 months to modify it. Not only demons, but also servants, as long as the target is hit, the only outcome waiting for them is to retreat. Although Zhuge Kongming's words sounded quite lofty, Wu Ming still found a problem. Military counselor, listening to what you mean, this thing can still miss. Yes. This made Gerdotsi, Mashu, and even Roman from Chaldea break out in cold sweat. It was the first time that they saw a weapon they designed not being able to hit the enemy, but still being able to say, yes. However, Wu Ming's question was indeed full of problems, so he simply helped Zhuge Kongming to smooth things over. The situation of missing is bound to happen. After all, the damage has changed from an area of effect to a single point. The demons won't stand there stupidly and let you hit them. They just need to aim and fire a few more times. That's impossible. The modified seal of divine authority will be scrapped after firing once. What? Zhuge Kongming's words completely shocked everyone. Although Gilgamesh did not say anything, he also showed a shocked expression. Obviously, Gilgamesh did not expect that Zhuge Kongming would transform the seal of divine authority into this. Then, in that case, wouldn't the seal of divine authority become a consumable? Although Matthew's words contained uncertainty, everyone present understood that the modified seal of divine authority by Zhuge Kongming was indeed a consumable. Then, Zhuge Kongming's expression was quite calm, and he spoke disapprovingly. The magic converted from the destroyed treasures in the seal of divine authority is unstable. That's why it can be used as a cannonball. I stabilized the cannonball's magic and concentrated it at a single point. Not only that, but I also increased the damage by ignoring the burden on the seal of divine authority. Although the cost is the self-destruction of the seal of divine authority, but overall, the damage caused has been increased to the extreme. Then, Zhuge Kongming changed the topic. Although I'm a caster, magician, I'm not good at making items. My ability is more focused on the battlefield. Creating a weapon that can deal extreme damage without causing a burden to the seal of divine authority, Dinger, is slightly beyond my ability. Although Zhuge Kongming belittled himself, the fact that he was able to transform the interior of the seal of divine authority was enough to prove that Zhuge Kongming's ability to make items was not low. After all, the strategist type of caster and the writer type of caster also had drawbacks when making items. But even so, Zhuge Kongming still transformed the Dinger into a satisfactory appearance. In the end, Zhuge Kongming gave a key answer. Moreover, as long as I can hit the monster commander, all the problems will not be a problem, right? Matthew was surprised. Yes, it is indeed as Mr. Kongming said. Although the seal of divine authority can only be used as a one-time consumable, as long as we can hit the monster commander, it will be fine. As long as we can hit the monster commander, we will be able to kill it. Matthew clenched his fists in front of his chest, looking quite cute. However, the expression on everyone's face gave Matthew a look of disapproval. As for the reason, it was very simple. After all, if we use this modified seal of divine authority to attack the monster commander, it will be easy for the monster commander to dodge the attack. Wu Ming sighed. Even if the monster commander is not aware of the danger, this method can only be used once. After all, the other magical beast commanders weren't blind. If they saw that the Dinger's attack could easily kill a magical beast commander, the other magical beast commanders would definitely pay attention to it. It would be even more difficult to hit it the next time. However, I don't think it will succeed once. After all, monster commanders have senses that are many times better than human beings. Their prediction of danger is also very strong. They will definitely be able to dodge it. As the last straw that broke the camel's back, Roman said a statement that cut off everyone's hope. Sure enough, we can only give up. Gadotsi couldn't help but show a disappointed expression. At this time, Zhuge Kongming confidently interrupted everyone. No, if we use a trick, we can actually let the modified divine power seal, Dinger, attack the demon's commander. Chapter 946. That's right. Zhuge Kongming was an outstanding person in terms of intelligence. Although Zhuge Kongming was not as outstanding as his contemporaries, that didn't mean that Zhuge Kongming wasn't good enough. It was just like how peacocks and phoenixes were not outstanding, but peacocks were much more colorful and outstanding than most birds. And judging from the fact that Zhuge Kongming's plan was effective, Zhuge Kongming's plan wasn't that bad. On the contrary, Zhuge Kongming was a completely trustworthy strategist. The reason why Zhuge Kongming designed the divine right seal, Dinger, to be a powerful attack at the cost of self-destruction was probably because he was confident in his plan. Putting aside the demonic beast commander who was using Enkidu's body, there were still 4 demonic beast commanders that had to be eliminated. If the divine right seal, Dinger, was used properly, it would have a 100% chance of hitting the demonic beast commanders. They would definitely be able to eliminate the demonic beast commanders without using Fanbaba or Gugulana. Well, let's listen to this king's words then. This king trusts you a lot, Gilgamesh nodded. It seemed that he valued Zhuge Kongming's brains a lot. At that moment, no one said anything more. After all, Gilgamesh had already said it. By the way, strategist Kongming, how many divine right seals, Dinger, have you modified? However, Zhuge Kongming said a number that made everyone's jaws drop. 1. Suddenly, no one said a word. The air seemed to have frozen. It was silent and cold. Wu Ming, who was the first to react, reached out his hand and slowly covered his ears. What? Gadotsi, Matthew, Roman, and even Leonardo da Vinci, who had been watching from the side, all let out shocking shouts. The sound waves were like shock waves, even causing the illusion that the entire cave was shaking. By the way, Gil, do you know about this? Wu Ming slowly put down his hands that were covering his ears and couldn't help but ask Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh, who was not affected by Gadotsi and the other's sonic attack, nodded. Indeed, this king knows about this. After all, this is the only dinger that this king gave to military counselor. The others are either in Uruk or in the North Wall. Immediately, everyone revealed a helpless expression. After all this time, it turned out that there was a problem on Gilgamesh's side. No. In fact, even if you give me more dinger, I can only modify 1 at the moment. 3 months is already my limit. Although Zhuge Kongming said so, there was no trace of shame on his face. Gadotsi and Matthew were still in a state of shock. Roman and Leonardo da Vinci, who were in Chaldea, also looked powerless. This turn of events was too much for them to bear. I take back my words of praise for Zhuge Kongming. After spending 3 months, he was only able to modify 1 dinger. There was no one else in the world who could do that. Thinking about how Zhuge Kongming's Stone Warrior 8 formations covered more than half of Mesopotamia, could it be that Zhuge Kongming's skill points were all spent on formation? Cough. Let's organize the information. All in all, we only have 1 dinger that can be used on a monster commander, right? Apart from Gilgamesh, everyone, including Zhuge Kongming, nodded silently. Wu Ming could not help but facepalm. Actually, it was not that bad. After all, at most, they had returned to the state before they met Zhuge Kongming. Since there is only 1 dinger, let's keep it as a ghost card for now. After all, there was only 1 modified dinger. There was no way to keep it as a consumable item. It might be useful as a ghost card. By the way, Gil, did you bring me here just to show me this? Previously, Gilgamesh had given orders and criticisms to everyone in the tower. Only Gilgamesh had requested to talk to Wu Ming privately. Although he had brought along Gadotsi and Matthew, it did not prevent Gilgamesh and Wu Ming from having a private chat. At the same time, Wuming did not think that Gilgamesh had called him for such a small matter. Even if the modified seal of divine right, Dinger, could destroy the demon commander in one strike, Silent Wonder wouldn't think that it was a big deal. After all, there was no need for Silent Wonder to personally see such a thing. All he needed to do was to display its effects on the battlefield. Of course, there is something else. Gilgamesh showed an expression that said, Hyunryong knows me best. Then, he walked to the corner and knocked on the stone wall. Come here and feel it with your magic. Wuming walked over and placed his hand on the stone wall. Then, he injected his magic into the wall. In an instant, a magnificent 3D projection appeared in Wuming's mind. This was the scene of the area covered by the stone formation. Everything on the ground could be seen clearly by Wuming. Many soldiers in the north wall were undergoing emergency maintenance as if a war was imminent. Leonidas I was constantly training the soldiers. Carts of supplies were pushed out of a military tent that was much larger than the other military tents. There were also people who could smile even in the face of the monster crisis. What is this? Wuming could not help but look at Gilgamesh who was beside him. The stone formation is used to monitor the situation on the ground. As a result, there is no way for him to investigate the situation on the ground. However, if there is someone with magic with the help of the stone formation, they can detect everything on the ground and underground. It is like a god's perspective. However, Wuming was still puzzled. What did this have to do with him? Wouldn't it be better to just find someone with magic? The reason why I called you over is because I received a mud tablet from the front line. It says that many magical beasts seem to be gathering in Nippur. Just by looking at their numbers, it seems like they are preparing for an unprecedented attack by magical beasts. After hearing Gilgamesh's words, Wuming subconsciously turned his attention to the place outside the north wall. If there is someone with more powerful magic, they will be able to see further places. Even this king is unable to observe the nearest city. At present, I am afraid that only you, Hyunryong, can do it. Therefore, the reason why Wuming was called over was to investigate the truth of the information sent from the front line. After all, the monster wave also had a monster wave commander. It was very likely that the monster wave had confused the humans. Therefore, they had to investigate. As Gilgamesh said, Wuming's magic was indeed the highest on their side. Even Ishtar's magic was not comparable to Wuming's. Just as Gilgamesh had said, the area covered by the stone soldier formation was only a small part of the northern wall. It was far from the extent of scouting the nearby cities. However, it was probably as Gilgamesh had said. Due to the large amount of mana, Silent Cry was able to see a few kilometers away from the northern wall. Chapter 947. Although he only caught a glimpse of it for a moment, the scene of magical beasts gathering and demons dancing was deeply imprinted in Wuming's mind. It was a city that had long been turned into ruins, and there were a large number of magical beasts of various shapes and sizes gathered there. The liger-type magical beasts roared at the sky, while the snake-type magical beasts breathed out on the ground. It was comparable to a group of demons dancing and 100 ghosts walking at night. The number of magical beasts shocked Wuming. There were at least tens of thousands of magical beasts. It was hard to imagine that so many magical beasts could gather in such a city. And from the glimpse just now, Wuming also saw that many magical beasts were still gathering there. It really looked like they were preparing for a big battle. Your information is correct, Gil. I saw a large number of magical beasts gathering in the ruins of Nippur. There are more than 10,000 magical beasts, and it's still increasing. Wuming could not help but frown. Oh, so it's like this. Gilgamesh frowned with his arms crossed in front of his chest. The magical beasts were really preparing for a big general attack. Kalas, can you project the scene I just saw from my mind? However, Kalas did not answer whether she could or could not. Instead, she began to execute Wuming's order. Yes, master. The dragon horn on Wu Ming's head fired a ray of magic at the wall. In an instant, a projected image appeared on the wall. It was the scene that Wu Ming had caught a glimpse of before. Wow! It's really a projection. Gadotzi shouted in surprise and trotted to Wu Ming's side. Sure enough, Miss Collis is very powerful. Matthew was amazed. Although he did not run like Gadotzi, he still walked over. Extracting the scene from Wu Ming's mind in an instant and projecting it, this once again proved that Collis was an advanced magic dress. Sure enough, Collis is a very advanced magic dress. If it was Leonardo da Vinci, it would not be possible to make it. Roman could not help but praise. However, for some reason, Roman's voice stopped abruptly as if fate had grasped his throat. I see, such an ability, it is indeed the work of the gem master. At this time, Leonardo da Vinci's voice came from Gadotzi's bracelet. Leonardo da Vinci's kiss. Gadotzi instantly felt that something was wrong. Not only Gadotzi, but Matthew, who was standing next to Gadotzi, was also shocked. At the same time, Roman, who was in Chaldea with his back facing Leonardo da Vinci, showed an expression that said, I'm done for. Leonardo da Vinci certainly could not make a magic dress like Collis. This was an indisputable fact. However, although it was a fact, whether or not he could say it in front of Leonardo da Vinci was another matter. By the way, the content of this projection is really bad. Leonardo da Vinci's tone was deliberately serious, giving a feeling that he was using force. The reason why Leonardo da Vinci could see it was because the screen in front of Gadotzi and Roman was transmitting the image that Gadotzi saw to Chaldea through the bracelet-type communication device worn by Gadotzi. Although the image that appeared in front of Gadotzi and the others was only a few seconds, everything in the image was the same as what Wu Ming had described. If the magical beasts were serious and launched an all-out attack, the humans would definitely not be able to resist. The magical beasts had gathered in large numbers, and the place where the magical beasts gathered was the nearest city to the north wall, Nippur. Therefore, the magical beasts preparing to attack the north wall was the most likely scenario. That was why Leonardo da Vinci said that the situation was bad. However, Gadotzi and Matthew did not have time to pay attention to the current situation. They were concerned about Leonardo da Vinci, who was in Chaldea, and Roman, who had not spoken since Leonardo da Vinci spoke. Leonardo da Vinci, are you okay? Matthew did not dare to directly ask Roman about the situation. He could only beat around the bush. Could it be that Dr. Roman had been killed? Gadotzi and Matthew thought of the same thing. I am the genius Leonardo da Vinci, what could happen to me? Don't worry, I asked Roman to help me make coffee. Why is Leonardo da Vinci so calm this time? Gadotzi was quite puzzled. He did not scold or attack, but just asked Roman to help him make coffee. Could it be that Leonardo da Vinci had developed a resistance to such things? I will unilaterally close the communication. As for the magical beasts and the projection, Chaldea still has to conduct a detailed analysis. Maybe there will be an unexpected discovery. For example, with so many magical beasts gathered, where did the commander go? Okay, Leonardo da Vinci, you go do your thing in Chaldea. Then, Leonardo da Vinci unilaterally closed the communication. After the communication was disconnected, Gadotzi and Matthew were relieved. From Leonardo da Vinci's words, she did not seem to be angry this time. However, Wu Ming noticed some details and sighed helplessly in his heart. Roman, you have to hold on. In Chaldea's control room, Roman pulled Leonardo da Vinci's arm that was handcuffed to his neck. His face was a little red, and he struggled hard to not be strangled. Leonardo da Vinci looked at the screen in front of him with a smile. After confirming that the communication was closed, he let go of the arm that almost strangled Roman to death. Cough cough. Cough 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 cough. Da Vinci's dear. Cough cough. Do you want to kill me? Roman laid on the table in front of him as if he was saved. He kept coughing and spoke weakly. He was just a human, and Leonardo da Vinci was a servant. Even the weakest servant's strength was not comparable to that of a human. Ah, it would be great if Mr. Roman could be strangled to death. Leonardo da Vinci said with a smile. People who didn't know would think that he was concerned about someone. Sure enough, Leonardo da Vinci said that he was fine, but his body was particularly in line with his thoughts. Roman felt that if it wasn't for the screen between Wu-Ming and Leonardo da Vinci, even if the other party was Wu-Ming, Leonardo da Vinci would still dare to go up. I have collected the projection just now, don't forget to analyze it, Leonardo da Vinci said, picked up a cup of coffee on the corner of the table and left. She really went to make coffee just now. Really, leaving things to me again. But when he thought that he just survived Leonardo da Vinci's capture, he didn't say anything more. Roman got up and went to the corner of the table, picked up another cup of coffee on the corner of the table. Leonardo da Vinci didn't just make a cup of coffee. Roman noticed that the staff of Chaldea had turned their eyes to him. Work hard. Then, he reprimanded them in a neither light nor heavy tone. Yes, sure enough, it didn't have much effect, but everyone still gave Roman face and immediately retracted their gaze. Only Roman, who seemed to have accepted his fate, returned to his seat tiredly. Chapter 948. In Zhuge Kongming's workshop, after Gadotsi and Matthew disconnected from Chaldea, they looked at Wu-Ming. Assassin, what should we do now? Senior Villo, there are so many magical beasts, we can't just leave them alone. Gadotsi and Matthew directly regarded Wu-Ming as their backbone. After making Collis put away the projection, Wu-Ming folded his arms and leaned against the smooth wall. We definitely can't just leave them alone, but I can't make up my mind. Under the puzzled eyes of Gadotsi and Matthew, Wu-Ming raised his hand and pointed to Gilgamesh who was standing on the side. Because of his clear vision, Gilgamesh didn't get close to Collis's projection like Gadotsi and Matthew did. Gilgamesh naturally didn't move in the slightest. At this moment, although Gadotsi and Matthew were a little far away from Gilgamesh, they still saw Gilgamesh's expressionless face. Oh, it's over. It seems that our king Gilgamesh is angry. Wu-Ming whispered to Gadotsi and Matthew with a mischievous smile. At this moment, Wu-Ming resembled Merlin. But it was indeed their fault. The Uruk king was clearly here, and they knew that the magical beasts were about to attack, but they didn't discuss it with the king. Instead, they looked for someone else. This was a crime of disrespect. Gadotsi and Matthew couldn't help but gulp, and a trace of cold sweat appeared on their foreheads. Obviously, they remembered the scene when they first met Gilgamesh and were almost beaten to death. Noticing Gadotsi and Matthew looking at him, and then looking at Wu-Ming's mischievous smile, Gilgamesh, who was originally thinking about something, instantly understood what was going on. Don't worry about this, king, you two can discuss it with Hyunryong. Then, Gilgamesh walked to the other side and called Zhuge Kongming. Counselor, tell this king about your plan for the Dinger. Yes, king. While talking, the two walked to the corner on the other side. I was scared to death. I didn't expect King Gilgamesh to not hold me accountable. Gadotsi patted her slightly raised chest and wiped the sweat on her forehead with the other hand. Sure enough, Gilgamesh is really a virtuous king. Although he was strict with others, he was stricter with himself. However, Matthew's words seemed to have exposed something. Could it be understood that she had never regarded Gilgamesh as a virtuous king? In short, as you can see, my status in the Uruk is actually not low, so you don't have to worry about making Gil unhappy by discussing it with me. Gadotsi and Matthew both looked at Wu-Ming with resentment. At this moment, the two of them knew that Wu-Ming obviously guessed this result, which was why he stood by and gloated. But when it was time to deal with business, they still had to deal with business. By the way, assassin, what should we do in the face of the demonic beast's attack this time? Because she became the governor of Emperor Nero in the Roman singularity, Gadotsi had a little experience in this kind of large-scale battle, but Gadotsi was still better at small team combat. After all, she was the master. However, even Gadotsi could see that with so many demonic beasts, and with the help of the demonic beast commander, it would be easy to break through the north wall. This was no longer a question of whether they could defend the north wall. The number of demonic beasts was like a natural disaster. Even if they used 300 people to stop tens of thousands of people, Leonidas I, who was good at defense, couldn't stop the natural disaster, right? If I can do it, then it will be easy. Although Wu Ming could probably stop these demonic beasts by using the method he used to kill the demonic beast commander, Ulidim, the north wall might completely collapse. In other words, there would be no way to defend the north wall next time. Moreover, this was the situation without taking into account the demonic beast commander. If there was a demonic beast commander, then the situation would be even worse. I think that the reason why the demonic beasts gathered together and prepared to launch an all-out attack is probably because the number of demonic beasts in the southwest and northeast wall was greatly reduced. They even lost 2 demonic beast commanders, so the other side is probably anxious. That's why they were preparing to take down the Uruk from the north wall in one fell swoop. Let the feathered god and Ishtar support the north wall. Let Ishtar release the sky bowl. During this time, I will try to find Fanbaba. At that time, the north wall will definitely be defended. Maybe we can even use this opportunity to kill the other side. As we said that, a cold light flashed in the corner of our eyes. There were only 5 demonic beast commanders left, including the one using Enkidu's body. If they gathered their strength, it wasn't impossible to eliminate all the demonic beast commanders. However, at this time, Gilgamesh interrupted Wu Ming's words. I'm afraid that's not possible. Wu Ming, Gadotsi, and Matthew turned their heads to look at Gilgamesh, who was walking towards them. Behind him was Zhuge Kongming, who had a worried expression, as if something big had happened. Gilgamesh was holding a clay tablet in his clawed hand. His body was surrounded by the golden ripples of the Gate of Babylon, and the tablet looked like it had just been taken out of the Gate of Babylon. This king's tablet can be connected to the words on the tablet that this king left in the Uruk. In short, it was like a modern text message. Gilgamesh casually threw it to Wu Ming. The owner of the tablet in the Uruk is Siduri. This is an emergency communication tool prepared in case something happens when this king goes out. After all, the magical beasts had changed a lot. Although Gilgamesh still went out during his rare free time, he would also leave an emergency communication tool. While Wu Ming was reading the message on the tablet, Gadotsi and Matthew also came over. However, the 2 of them couldn't understand it, so they could only let Wu Ming read it to them. The jungle is in an emergency. A large number of magical beasts are attacking. Wu Ming couldn't help but frown. After so many magical beasts in Nippur city in the north, they could still arrange magical beasts to attack the jungle in the south. How many magical beasts did the goddess of Warcraft produce? Wu Ming finally understood. The plan of the magical beast commanders had never changed. Just as Merlin said, the magical beasts might set up multiple routes as the main force to encircle and attack. The magical beasts gathered in Nippur city were indeed the main force, but the main force couldn't be in one place. As long as the magical beast commanders had enough soldiers, the main force could be set up in multiple places. The magical beasts attacking the jungle in the south were another main force. The magical beasts want to attack us from both the north and the south. It seemed that the magical beasts really wanted to take down the Uruk along with the Quetzalcoatl, and they seem to have the strength to do so. There's no time to delay. Tachika Fujimaru, Matthew Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh looked serious and turned to Gadotsi and Matthew. You 2 return to the Uruk and take Merlin and Anna to the jungle in the south to support the Quetzalcoatl. The vacation is temporarily cancelled. When the magical beasts are defeated, the vacation will be doubled. Yes. King Gilgamesh. Chapter 949. Gadotsi and Matthew responded, but just as they were about to move, Wuming pressed on their shoulders. I'll send you there. Wuming had been to the southern Quetzalcoatl's jungle and also to the Uruk. He could use the portal to pick people up and send them directly to the southern jungle. However, Gilgamesh rejected Wuming's suggestion. No, you have other more important tasks, so you must stay here. Wuming frowned subconsciously. He felt that it wouldn't take much time to send them there, but since Gilgamesh said so, there must be a reason. In the next second, Gilgamesh said the reason. Although the southern jungle is in an emergency, the tropical rainforest is a natural barrier, so it's not that serious. On the contrary, we may be attacked by a large number of magical beasts at any time. If the northern wall was breached, then humans would be completely finished. Without the defense of the northern wall, magical beasts could invade humans at any time and anywhere. In other words, Wuming had to stay in the northern wall as insurance. At this moment, Wuming could only accept his fate. Then, Wuming turned to look at Gadotsi and Matthew. In that case, you can only find a way to rush to the southern jungle. Don't worry about this, this king will let Siduri take Fujimaru, Merlin, and the others to the jungle. Gilgamesh interrupted with confidence. As for how to send Gadotsi and the others to the southern jungle, Wuming didn't know. But since Gilgamesh said so, it must be certain. With his hands crossed, Gilgamesh walked in front of Gadotsi and Matthew, and his tone became stern. This is your second mission, and I don't want to see the same result as the first mission, do you understand? Yes. Gilgamesh's serious look had a big impact on Gadotsi and Matthew. The two couldn't help but straighten their backs and answer Gilgamesh. Finally, Zhuge Kongming spoke. Then, let me help you return to the Uruk from here. Gadotsi and Matthew were puzzled. It was already very fast to pass through the passage. Did Zhuge Kongming have a faster way? Zhuge Kongming came to one of the 8 stone platforms placed in the center. He opened the stone platform like opening a box and took out a strange wooden tool that looked like a cart with a wooden bull's head. Following the same pattern, Zhuge Kongming took out another similar tool from another stone platform as if he was opening a box. However, this tool had a wooden horse's head. Mr. Kongming, what's this? Matthew didn't recognize what it was. Zhuge Kongming took out a feather fan from somewhere. He held the feather fan and waved it as he spoke. The item I made is called wooden ox horse. Wooden ox horse. Is that the wooden ox horse? Gadotsi was shocked. Although it's not a noble artifact, it's almost there. Zhuge Kongming nodded. He wasn't surprised that Gadotsi and Matthew from the future knew about the wooden ox horse. Anyone who had read the novel Romance of the Three Kingdoms or knew about Zhuge Kongming would know about the existence of the wooden ox horse. However, there were different opinions about the inventor. Some said that Zhuge Kongming's wife, Huang Yueying, invented it. Some said that Zhuge Kongming invented it himself, and some said that the two of them invented it together. But who invented it wasn't the main point. The main point was that the wooden ox horse was a transportation tool that wasn't worse than modern times. It could travel 30 miles for groups and dozens of miles for special travelers. That was the evaluation of the wooden ox horse. The general idea was simple and clear. Anyway, it could quickly transport goods. As long as the two of you sit on it, you can reach Uruk from the passage in an instant. Ha! Gadotsi and Matthew were shocked by Zhuge Kongming's words. Could it really be that fast? Seeing a trace of doubt in their eyes, Zhuge Kongming didn't explain too much. They would know after using it. Anyway, the two of you sit on it first. Zhuge Kongming waved his feather fan, and the two wooden ox horses beside him instantly moved. They rushed directly behind Gadotsi and Matthew, gently bumped their legs, and directly put the two people who subconsciously squatted in the back pocket of the wooden ox horse. Wait a minute, it's a little crowded, after all, it was used to transport goods. Although it could carry people, the space on the back of the wooden ox horse was a little narrow. The two couldn't adjust their bodies for a while. It was as if their butts had sunk into the toilet bowl, and they looked quite embarrassed at the moment. Fortunately, Gadotsi was wearing a formal dress, and Matthew was wearing a heroic spirit costume, otherwise, they would definitely be exposed. However, even if they weren't exposed, the embarrassment brought about by the limited cooperation between the two of them could still stimulate some perverted desires. Before Gadotsi and Matthew could fully adjust their bodies, Zhuge Kongming immediately ordered the wooden ox horse. "There's no time to lose, let's go." In an instant, the two wooden ox horses carrying Gadotsi and Matthew rushed directly in the direction of the gate that everyone had entered before at a speed faster than a modern sports car, but strangely, there was a wall there. Zhuge Kongming snapped his fingers, and a part of the wall automatically split open, forming a door, allowing the two wooden ox horses to rush out. "Ah!" Gadotsi and Matthew screamed from the door that had not yet closed. Wuming estimated that it was almost the same feeling as riding a roller coaster. "I've modified this path. Not only can it shorten the distance and increase the speed of travel, but it's also a branch that my stone formation 8 formations can cover underground. More importantly, this path can make the wooden ox move faster." "I see, that's why it can return to the Uruk in an instant." Wuming nodded silently, but Wuming was quite interested in the branch that Zhuge Kongming mentioned. According to Zhuge Kongming, Stone Army 8 formations probably relied on this so-called branch to extend and cover more than half of Mesopotamia. "Counselor, is there only one branch?" Wuming felt that since this passage was a branch that covered more than half of Mesopotamia, there should be more than one. After all, this branch alone couldn't cover all of it. This passage is specially connected to the Uruk, and there are 7 other endings that connect to 7 places on the northern wall. Chapter 950. After Zhuge Kongming finished, he snapped his fingers again and 7 doors suddenly appeared on the stone walls around the magic workshop. If the door leading to the Uruk was included, there were exactly 8 doors. And looking at it carefully, the 8 doors corresponded to the 8 stone platforms in the center one by one. It seemed that there was some kind of connection between the 8 doors and the 8 stone platforms. This was probably the so-called formation. These 7 tunnels were opened by me using wooden oxen and flowing horses. They extend in all directions and cover the land behind the north wall. It turned out that wooden ox could be used like this. It was worthy of being a prop made by a servant. It could be used as a tool to dig tunnels. It was really tough. Moreover, the passages of the other 7 doors are completely connected to each other. So, the soldiers in the north wall can be deployed quickly. In other words, the passages of these 7 doors were the same as the one connected to the Uruk. It had a similar effect of acceleration. According to Zhuge Kongming's previous statement, the ends of these 7 passages were connected to 7 places near the north wall. In this way, these passages could not only be used as branches for the stone formation to cover the underground, but also allow the soldiers to move quickly. Deployment, support, supply, etc., could be completed very quickly. Moreover, these passages were connected to 7 places in the north wall. With Leonidas I's defense and Zhuge Kongming's strategy, it was not unreasonable for the north wall to not be breached until today. "My king, do you want to go to the north wall or return to the Uruk? I still have 6 wooden ox. No matter where you want to go, I can send you there in an instant." "Of course it's the Uruk, idiot." This king is relieved to leave the north wall to Leonidas. But if this king and Siduri are not in the Uruk, it will be chaotic. This was not a lie. Although Gilgamesh going to the north wall could increase the morale of the soldiers, the overall situation was still more important. As Gilgamesh just said, Siduri will take Gadotsi and others to the southern jungle. If there was no one in the Uruk who could control the overall situation, something would definitely happen. But this king doesn't need your wooden ox. This king can go back by himself. After Gilgamesh finished, he threw himself into the door and was buried in the darkness of the passage. But after seeing how Gadotsi and Matthew were sent back, who would want to ride Zhuge Kongming's wooden ox? In that case, I will go directly to the north wall. After stretching his body, Wu Ming looked at Zhuge Kongming. Is there a direct passage to the surface? You can go directly to the north wall. Wu Ming was going to go to the north wall to see the situation before making a decision. However, when Wu Ming left, the north wall was not built yet, so Wu Ming couldn't use the portal. Moreover, this place was still deep underground. Although Wu Ming had the ability to drill out of the ground, he couldn't really do it. Zhuge Kongming seemed to be a little obsessed with the wooden ox. Gilgamesh didn't succeed, so Zhuge Kongming started to attack Wu Ming. I can use it. However, Zhuge Kongming just said a few words, but he was directly interrupted by Wu Ming. No, I am quite confident in my speed. The scene fell into silence. I see. In that case, follow my wooden ox. It will guide you to the right way to the north wall. Please. After that, Zhuge Kongming opened another stone platform and took out a new wooden ox, and Wu Ming followed the wooden ox into one of the 7 passages. So, what should I do next? Zhuge Kongming muttered to himself. After all, Gilgamesh didn't give him any orders before leaving. While thinking, Zhuge Kongming couldn't help but turn his eyes to the only modified divine power seal, Dinger, placed in the center of his workshop and fell into silence. On the other side, Wu Ming, who was moving very quickly with the wooden ox, also found the light in front. We probably reached the surface. At the same time, Wu Ming also found that the wooden ox that led him began to turn back. It seemed that he should have reached his destination. Kalas, can you speculate our current location? Wu Ming's dragon horn headdress made a beep sound, then it turned into a female voice. Master, we are currently near the Euphrates River. There are life signs around us. The characteristics of life signs are human. Preliminary inference is that this place is similar to the rear supply barracks. It seems that the wooden ox didn't take Wu Ming to the north wall. It just gave Wu Ming a random exit that connected to the surface. However, this was indeed in line with Wu Ming's previous request. But Wu Ming thought that there were no additional exits. He originally thought that he would reach the north wall when he reached the surface. It turns out that there are other exits besides the north wall. Zhuge Kongming didn't even say anything, but thinking about it carefully, Zhuge Kongming did only say that the end of the 7 passages is located at the north wall. Zhuge Kongming didn't lie, but at the same time, he didn't say everything. In short, although Wu Ming wasn't indirectly cheated by Zhuge Kongming, it was still a small joke that wasn't serious. That old fox, he must have taken the opportunity to retaliate against me because I rejected him. With a helpless smile, Wu Ming didn't care about this anymore. After all, it was just a harmless joke. Walking toward the place where there was light, Wu Ming found that this was actually the interior of a large tent. Wu Ming had seen such a tent before. There were such tents near the north wall. Wu Ming also saw carts full of supplies being pushed out of the tents before. It turns out that those tents are actually the exits of the passage. The troops here were judged by Kalas to be the logistics troops, and they could definitely reach the north wall from this passage. This also explained where the supplies came from. It seems that Zhuge Kongming was not just holed up in his workshop in the past 3 months when he was summoned by Gilgamesh. Whether it was the wooden ox or the underground maze-like passages, they were all personally planned by Zhuge Kongming. Perhaps there were also entrances to the underground passages in the logistics barracks. Zhuge Kongming is really a great strategist. He is really thoughtful about logistics. This was the so-called, before the troops and horses move, the provisions will move first. In that case, I will rely on my own strength to go to the north wall. Wu Ming said a few words to the people in the logistics camp. Then, under their respectful and shocked gazes, Wu Ming flew up into the sky and headed for the northern wall. Chapter 951. As the saying goes, the higher you stand, the further you can see. Wu Ming, who was flying in the sky, could easily see the north wall. Wu Ming once again sighed as he looked at the north wall that traversed the east and west of Mesopotamia not far away. This north wall was built by manpower. If it could be passed down to future generations, it would certainly become an ancient monument not inferior to the pyramids and the Great Wall. After all, it was a defensive barrier against monsters. However, the north wall would not be passed down to future generations. After all, it was a special place called singularity. Things in singularity would be corrected by correct history. Perhaps it would be more serious than the legendary hanging courtyard of Babylon. The north wall would be completely lost in the long river of history. However, he still had to overcome the difficulties in front of him. Otherwise, forget about future generations, the entire history of mankind may disappear. Kalas, help me find the place with the most prominent signs of life as a landing point. The most prominent signs of life represented the most people. In this case, the chances of encountering the commander of the North Wall would be higher. Wu Ming searched for signs of life below and came to the place with the most prominent signs of life. The soldiers below naturally noticed Wu Ming in the sky. They originally thought that it was an enemy attack, but it turned out to be their god. Is that Hyunryong Sama? Hyunryong Sama has come to the North Wall. Hyunryong Sama. In an instant, the soldiers began to cheer and shouted at Wu Ming. The gods of the gods era were absolute to humans. They were even more powerful than human kings. Although the current Mesopotamia was at the end of the gods era, the people here were still full of respect for the gods. However, this made Wu Ming very helpless. He didn't know what to say. Why did the gods like to spread their faith and collect believers everywhere? Because the ancient human hearts were very simple. If you were good to them, they would praise you, welcome you, and praise you. Besides the evil gods, who didn't like such humans? Wu Ming didn't put on airs and flew straight down. It could be seen that these soldiers were conscientious in their duties. Even in the face of their Lord God, the soldiers who were guarding their posts did not move at all. Other things aside, Leonidas I's training of the soldiers did make them more dutiful. However, the nearby soldiers and logistics personnel who were not in important positions all came to Wu Ming's side and knelt down. Even the soldiers who were standing guard at their posts bowed to Wu Ming in respect of the gods. I didn't come here to accept your worship. All of you, return to your posts. You are the front line, and the safety of the rear is at stake. Therefore, move out. Wu Ming's last sentence was infused with magic. His voice, which was full of majesty but not strict, was transmitted to the ears of everyone present. Oh, oh, oh. His sonorous and forceful words filled everyone's ears, causing them to cheer energetically. Although, in accordance with the will of the god, everyone returned to their posts. Sir Hyunryong, why are you here today? A rough voice with a hint of delicacy came from afar. Wu Ming looked up. It was a brawny man with most of his skin exposed. He was wearing a Spartan-style helmet and a red cloak. His exposed skin was full of explosive muscles, giving people an extreme sense of security. So it's the king of Sparta. It's been a long time. Wu Ming showed a relieved expression. The person who came was one of the lancers summoned by Gilgamesh, the king of Sparta, Leonidas I. Wu Ming only saw him once when Leonidas I was summoned. After that, Wu Ming quickly left. It seemed that Wu Ming's idea was right. The place with the most prominent signs of life was indeed the force commander, Leonidas I. Just call me Leonidas. After all, I'm now the subject of the king of Gilgamesh. It was inappropriate for a subject to call himself a king. Leonidas said as he walked in front of Wu Ming. You look good. The soldiers have also been trained by you to be so strong. No wonder you're the king of Sparta. After all, Sparta had become a special synonym in the future. The humans of this era are strong and have an extremely simple temperament. I didn't spend much effort to train them. Wu Ming nodded. It's good that you're satisfied with the physical fitness of the humans of this era. By the way, I'm here on the orders of King Gilgamesh. However, Wu Ming only said this, and Leonidas guessed the reason. It's because of the information I sent to Uruk. The suspected gathering of a large number of demonic beasts was enough to attract attention. Yes, I took over the military advisor's workshop to explore. I did see a large number of demonic beasts gathering in the city of Nippur. Wu Ming told him the information he received. Have you been to the military advisor's workshop? If it's you, you can indeed see that scene. The existence of Zhuge Kong Ming was not a secret to Leonidas I. When Gilgamesh summoned again and selected many servants to carry out the decapitation plan, Leonidas I, who was burning with passion, also wanted to participate. This kind of suicidal behavior was similar to Leonidas I leading 300 people to fight against the Persian army. It could be said that it was the most exciting thing to arouse Leonidas I's passion. In the end, he was stopped by Zhuge Kongming, who advised him. Only then did Leonidas I settle down. After all, as a defensive talent who led a mere 300 people to delay the Persian army until the Allies retreated, how could he be a suicide squad? The most important thing to highlight Leonidas I's value was the defense against the demonic beasts in the North Wall. And Leonidas I did not disappoint everyone's expectations of him, and he did not disappoint himself. He successfully led the humans to resist the attack of the demonic beasts for half a year. However, this time it's really a total attack of the demonic beasts. Leonidas I's face, which could not be seen by others because of the helmet, showed a trace of relief. He also guessed that this would be the result. As a soldier, a king, Leonidas I had been collecting information from Uruk, and he was also aware of the turmoil in the southwest and northeast. The attacks of the demonic beasts in both places ended in failure. Perhaps the only choice was to gather the demonic beasts to attack the North Wall. If this dragged on, it would indeed have a negative impact on the demonic beasts. Not only that, just now, we received news that the territory of the Quetzalcoatl has also suffered a fierce attack from the demonic beasts. Chaldea's group has been sent by King Gilgamesh to support them. Could it be? Leonidas I seemed to have thought of something, and his voice became surprised. It's probably as you think. The demonic beasts are preparing to attack the humans from all directions, and at the same time, eliminate the Quetzalcoatl. To be able to attack the remaining humans in Mesopotamia from the north and south, and also prepare to eliminate the pillar goddess of the Three Goddesses Alliance, the other party must have sufficient confidence to do so. In this way, the number of demonic beasts was probably unimaginable. This is really crazy. Leonidas gasped. But isn't this also the beginning of our counterattack? If the demonic beasts were to attack in full force, the remaining 5 demonic beast commanders would definitely appear. After all, the battlefield was split into the southern forest and the north wall. If it was really a general attack, there was a high chance that Gorgon would appear. If Wu Ming and the others took the opportunity to eliminate Gorgon, who had Tiamat's authority, then the humans in Mesopotamia would be able to overcome this crisis. Among the Three Goddesses Alliance, the Quetzalcoatl was the most rebellious and stood on the side of the humans. The underworld goddess Ereshkigal could not leave the underworld. More importantly, Ereshkigal's attitude towards the humans was similar to that of the Quetzalcoatl. Although they had only met once, Wu Ming's intuition told him that Ereshkigal was a goddess who wanted to help the humans. It was probably like how the Quetzalcoatl was preparing to use her own methods to save the humans. Therefore, as long as the demonic beasts and the goddess of demonic beasts were eliminated, then they could deal with Ereshkigal, who was thinking for the humans. At that time, when she found out that 2 of the 3 goddesses had been defeated by the humans, and she became a threat to the humans in Mesopotamia, Ereshkigal would probably give up on being the enemy of the humans. Because there were enemies that threatened the humans, Ereshkigal would provide special assistance to the humans. But if one day, all the enemies that threatened the humans disappeared, and her special method of assistance became the last enemy that threatened the humans, was there a need to continue? With Ereshkigal's dignified personality, she would probably stop. Therefore, it was not a bad idea to wipe out the forces of the magical beast goddess that had come out in full force. While thinking, Wuming said, "That's why Gilgamesh sent me to the North Wall." As for whether it was Gilgamesh's idea, it didn't matter. Anyway, Gilgamesh would definitely allow Wuming to act on his own. So that's how it is. Leonidas I also understood what Wuming meant. This was indeed a good way to deal with the goddess of magical beasts, and it was to deal with her in one go. But you have to be prepared, because I'm the only one who can support the North Wall. These words surprised Leonidas I again. Northwest is Abif Mountain, the territory of the Mistress of the Heavens, Goddess Ishtar. There was a big change in that direction before. It should be because you and Ishtar fought. I heard that Goddess Ishtar has been subdued by you. Can't she come to support you? Probably because of the existence of the feathered serpent god, the accelerated tunnel, and other convenient means of communication, Leonidas I had already received the news that Uruk Hyunryong has subdued the Mistress of the Heavens, Goddess Ishtar. Wuming didn't mean to hide it, and since Leonidas I also knew about this, then Wuming had to inform Leonidas I about the specific situation. Indeed, as you received the news, Goddess Ishtar is now on our side, but she's not free. When I was flying in the sky just now, I sent her a message. I asked her to support other places. Is it the territory of the southern feathered serpent god? Isn't there already support from Chaldea there? Leonidas I was quite puzzled. Although the enemy was divided into 2 parts to attack, the North Wall was much more dangerous and important than the forest of the feathered serpent god. Leonidas I didn't understand, how could Wuming ignore the overall situation? However, the truth was not what Leonidas I thought. I didn't ask her to support the feathered serpent god. Then, Wuming looked to the southeast. I asked her to go to the Persian Gulf. Southeast, near the Persian Gulf. Ishtar was flying on Anna, who was sitting on the sky ship, toward the Persian Gulf with a look of displeasure. Damn Hyunryong, is he really going to squeeze me to the extreme? Ishtar was quite angry at the moment. Ishtar was flying freely in the sky before, fully relieving the anger she suffered from Gilgamesh. However, just now, Wuming used the connection between the 2 sides after signing the contract to give Ishtar an order. Wuming's order was like this. Go to the Persian Gulf to investigate. If you encounter demonic beasts, stop them and don't let them come ashore. However, Ishtar scoffed. At most, there are some Kururu that accidentally flowed here along the Euphrates River and the Tigris River. Not to mention that these demonic beasts can't set off a storm, moreover, Kururu can only move in the water. Ishtar stopped and looked at the Persian Gulf below, full of resentment. In the end, because it's related to the demonic beasts, I can't refuse that bastard's order. So, Ishtar, who didn't know that there was an emergency in the North Wall and the South Jungle, thought that we were playing tricks on her. She came to the Persian Gulf with grief and helplessness in her heart. There are no demonic beasts here. Not to mention the demonic beasts that can go ashore, the Kururu in the water almost disappeared during this time. Ishtar patrolled the waters of the Persian Gulf, ignoring the kneeling humans on the ground, and ended the patrol. There are no demonic beasts at all, let's go. At the moment, Ishtar wanted to leave here and find a family with a lot of gemstones to do a good deal to ease her current bad mood. However, at this moment, there was a sudden magical reaction under the water of the Persian Gulf. Ishtar noticed it in an instant, but then, her eyes widened. At this moment, Ishtar also understood that Wuming was not playing tricks on her. Demonic beasts really appeared in the Persian Gulf. And the number was extremely shocking. Chapter 952. This magic. How many magical beasts are there? Feeling the rapid emergence of a large amount of magic in the Persian Gulf, Ishtar's voice could not help but tremble. The magic emitted by each magical beast was not amazing. What shocked Ishtar was the number of magical beasts emitting magic. Ants were not terrible, but if there were a large number of ants, they could bite an elephant to death. However, not to mention biting an elephant to death, if there were enough ants, they could drown an elephant just by relying on their numbers. The amazing magic that emerged from the Persian Gulf was caused by the convergence of a large number of magical beasts. Because of the large number of magical beasts emitting magic, the surface of the Persian Gulf even became a little turbulent, like the coast was about to be hit by a storm. The people at the Persian Gulf Observatory also noticed the turbulence in the Persian Gulf and went to the seaside to check the situation. However, they saw a figure emerge from the Persian Gulf. There are humans in the sea. Looking at the figure, it seemed to be a woman. The people who saw this scene were shocked. They thought that someone had fallen into the water and immediately prepared to save the person who had fallen into the water. However, before they could act, one figure after another emerged from the water, and the strange thing was that these figures all looked the same. This strange scene made the people standing by the sea fall into silence, as if they could not react. No. No. That's the magical beast Kururu. It was unknown who suddenly said this, but the silence turned into panic before anyone could react. Everyone looked again. The figures in the water were not people who had fallen into the water. They were clearly ugly magical beasts with the lower body of a fish and the upper body of a human. After all, even if there was only one magical beast, it was extremely fatal to non-combatants like them, not to mention that there was more than one here. Don't panic. I remember King Gilgamesh said that this magical beast called Kururu can only move in the water. There is no example of it going ashore. Although this person's voice was quite panicked, it reminded everyone. There weren't many mass-produced magical beasts in Kururu that entered the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. After Gilgamesh sent people to clean them up for a few days, these magical beasts basically disappeared from the Persian Gulf. Although there might have been some lucky survivors, the people here had never encountered them again. It was true that he hadn't encountered any before, but it wasn't a good thing to encounter such a large number of magical beasts. Fortunately, the magical beasts they encountered were Kururu and couldn't go ashore. Otherwise, they would be in danger. Thinking of this, the surrounding people gradually calmed down, and even bravely observed the large number of Kururu in the water. Some of them only had a little contact with this kind of magical beast, and some didn't even have the slightest contact with it. Humans were always curious about the unknown, which led to the next scene. Although this magical beast looks like a human, it is still a little ugly. And it looks like a woman, but it's really not pleasing to the eye. That's right, the other magical beasts are wild beasts, but why do these Kururu look so strange? Probably because they can only live in the water. It didn't matter if they were bold or fearless. In short, because they weren't threatened by the life-threatening danger, they all began to criticize Kurulu. Ishtar, who was flying in the sky, saw the behavior of these humans, and Ishtar commented on it. These fools. It was normal for humans to not know about magical beasts, but as a member of the gods, Ishtar knew about them. Although Ishtar had never seen this kind of magical beast, from the past rumors, Ishtar knew that these magical beasts didn't only live in the water. After all, they were also known as the winged mermaid. As the name implied, they had wings. Poochie, as if something had broken out of its body, a pair of large wings grew out of the back of a Kururu. Then, the wings on the back of the Kururu flapped slowly, bringing the Kururu into the air. The tail of its lower body was still flapping subconsciously, as if it was a little uncomfortable. Then, one by one, the Kururu came out of the back of a large number of Kururu, and a pair of wings grew out of the back of a large number of kururu, bringing countless of them into the sky together. The magical beasts, kururu, also known as the winged mermaid, all flew into the sky while the nearby humans were in a daze. It's over. It was unknown who said this, but the atmosphere of despair spread among the crowd. Facing the magical beasts, kururu that could fly out of the water and into the sky, there was only one outcome for these non-combatants, and that was death. Some people even sat on the ground as if they had completely given up, quietly waiting for the arrival of death. At this moment, a voice like the cry of the goddess of victory sounded in everyone's ears. And Gal Tak Hygel Shi, mountain-shaking star salary. A dazzling light comparable to Venus directly hit the group of kururu magical beasts in the sky, and an explosion occurred suddenly. Boom! The light covered everyone's eyes, and in the next second, the crowd screamed in panic. Wah! Due to the airflow caused by the explosion, the people were scared shitless. But fortunately, no one was in life-threatening danger. The wind and waves soon subsided, and when people looked up to check the situation, they saw the goddess of Venus. Mistress of the heavens. It's Lady Ishtar. It's Lady Ishtar, the goddess who often plunder my family's gems. Lady Ishtar saved us. Ignoring some of the strange sentences, Ishtar's ears were filled with the cheers of the humans for her. After seeing the goddess, the people no longer panicked, not only because Ishtar saved them, but also because the humans' dependence on the goddess had an important impact on them. Tell everyone nearby to retreat and report the situation here to the Uruk. I'll hold off the magical beasts here for the time being. Ishtar was like a heroine, valiantly giving orders to the people. Yes, Lady Ishtar. We'll follow your orders. After kneeling and thanking Ishtar, the people quickly left the area, called the nearby humans, and moved toward the Uruk. Chapter 953. At this moment, Ishtar, who noticed that everyone had left, was elated. Yes. I've wanted to say this for a long time. Acting cool is indeed the best. My prestige has been spread once again. At this moment, Ishtar seemed a little unreliable. However, Ishtar was not arrogant enough to think that she could eliminate all the demonic beasts in the Persian Gulf with a reduced version of her relic. Ishtar turned her head to look at the Persian Gulf. The smoke from the explosion gradually dispersed. As expected, there were still many kururu in the sky above the Persian Gulf. These were not the kururu that Ishtar had hit. Those kururu that were hit by Ishtar had fallen into the water. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. These were the kururu that took the opportunity to fly up after the explosion. Hiss! The kururu, who were obviously mermaids, made a snake-like sound and rushed towards Ishtar. Whoosh! A ray of light shot out from the launch port of Tianzhou's horse Anna and directly hit the kururu at the front. The power of the light directly blew the kururu into pieces and even affected the surrounding kururu. Ishtar kept his left arm pointing straight forward and his right hand under his left elbow. A smile appeared on his face. It was a beautiful smile full of confidence. Anyone who saw this scene would be captivated by Ishtar's smile at this moment. Unfortunately, only the unromantic and extremely ugly kururu could see this scene. Demonic beasts were originally beasts. Since they were beasts, they should appear in the form of beasts. However, these mermaids had a similar body shape to humans. To put it simply, they were demonic beasts that had the appearance of humans. This caused these mermaids to look extremely ugly. Their long cheeks spread out from both sides of their faces and their mouths were filled with shark-like teeth. Their heads, shoulders, arms, elbows, and spines were filled with a single saw-like fin. It was as if they were born to kill. Even the webbing between their claws had become extremely sharp and could be used as thin and transparent blades. What looked like a female's chest was actually two lumps of pectoral fins that were curled together. There was also a tail that was like a cape on its waist. Further down, its lower body was completely a thick fish tail. Its skin was covered with greenish-brown scales. Its blood-red eyes were filled with killing intent and hatred towards humans. This was the same gaze as other demonic beasts. Although I was forced by that bastard Hyunryong, since I'm here, I naturally have no reason to let you go. Be prepared. In the next second, countless rays of light like curved bullets flew towards the group of Kururu demonic beasts that were rushing towards Ishtar. An explosion suddenly occurred. However, Ishtar, who was bombarding the winged Kururu in the sky, did not notice that in the depths of the Persian Gulf, there was a scarlet eye that was different from the other Kururu demonic beasts. It was quietly watching this scene. On the north wall, Leonidas had also finished listening to Wu Ming's explanation. I see. You thought that demonic beasts would appear in the Persian Gulf, so you sent Lady Ishtar there. This was indeed possible. Leonidas might not know, but Wu Ming had already learned the intentions of the demonic beasts from Merlin. They were preparing to attack the Uruk from all directions. The demonic beasts' commanders did not know that Merlin had used Ulidim as a tool to collect information, so their plan was likely to proceed as usual. Although there was a defense in the Persian Gulf, the defense there was basically prepared to deal with the Kururu that might exist in the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. The Persian Gulf in the southeast could be said to be safer than the North Wall, the South Jungle, the Western Mountains, and even the Northeastern Mountains. After all, it was adjacent to the Indian Ocean, and the demonic beasts could not pass through the surrounding areas to reach there. The only danger was the Kururu that came from the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. However, the Kururu could not go ashore. In a sense, this was not a danger in the case of proper defense. Not to mention, Gilgamesh had sent people to hunt down the Kururu in the river and the Persian Gulf. Although Gilgamesh knew that there were Kururu demonic beasts in the river and the Persian Gulf, he had no way to deal with them. After all, as long as the Kururu escaped to the bottom of the river or sneaked into the Persian Gulf, humans would not be able to do anything to these demonic beasts. However, with Zhuge Ming's stone formation covering most of the Uruk, there would be no new Kururu entering the Persian Gulf through the Euphrates and Tigris rivers. Therefore, as long as the river was well defended and targeted at the remaining Kururu in the Persian Gulf, the area around the Persian Gulf was basically safer than the Uruk. No matter how one looked at it, it was foolproof. However, Wu Ming did not think so. Now, there was no place that was absolutely safe in the Uruk. The safer the place, the more likely it was to be dangerous. The Uruk was in the center, but it was still attacked by one of the demonic beast commanders, Mu Xiu and Hu Xiu. The Persian Gulf was only far from the North Wall, so it could not be classified as safe. Therefore, Wu Ming asked Ishtar to go to the Persian Gulf to see the situation. If there were no demonic beasts, Ishtar would directly come to the North Wall for support. However, if there were demonic beasts, Ishtar would be responsible for eliminating them. With the Bull of Heaven, Ishtar would not be afraid even if she faced a demonic beast commander. No, meeting a demonic beast commander was what Wu Ming wanted. Because this way, he could take advantage of this opportunity to eliminate another demonic beast commander. But this is also good. If there are demonic beasts there and no one to deal with them, the Uruk and even the entire Mesopotamia may be completely finished. If a large number of demonic beasts or even demonic beast commanders appeared in the Persian Gulf, whether it was the North Wall or the Quetzalcoatl in the southern jungle, they would not be able to provide support to the Persian Gulf. Needless to say, the southern jungle would have already started fighting with the demonic beasts. As for the North Wall, they would probably have already started fighting with the demonic beasts. For the same reason, there would be no way to send reinforcements. Just as Leonidas was sighing, Wu Ming noticed that Ishtar's magical power was being drained by a large amount from the contract he signed with Ishtar. It seemed that Wu Ming was right. Demonic beasts had appeared in the Persian Gulf, and there were a lot of them. Otherwise, Ishtar would not have to spend so much effort. It seems that Ishtar has already started fighting with the demonic beasts. I can feel that she is using a lot of magical power from the contract. Leonidas could not help but feel excited. "It seems that you are right, Sir Hyunryong." But just as Leonidas was in awe again, the ancient clock hanging high up on the northern wall rang out crisp and incessant. Ding, 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 ding. As the clock rang, the soldiers on the north wall who were on alert shouted, "The demonic beasts are coming." Chapter 954. "Sir Hyunryong, I'll take my leave first," Leonidas said in a hurry. Then, two streams of mana gathered in Leonidas's hands and turned into a heavy spear and a small metal shield. Leonidas then walked towards the north wall. The sound of the bell was still rippling. The sound of the bell spread from here to the other parts of the north wall. For a time, the people of the north wall were mobilized. Wuming flew up into the sky and let Kalas project the situation of the north wall in front of him. Wuming could now see the situation of the north wall. Wuming wanted to see how the humans were relying on the north wall to defend against the magical beasts. Everyone at the north wall moved. The soldiers were fully armed and ready to fight. The logistics personnel stopped what they were doing and put the things in their hands in the corner to avoid affecting the soldiers' movements. Then, the logistics personnel retreated to a safe area. On the north wall, the soldiers were ready with bows and arrows. But for some reason, they were hidden in the battlements of the north wall. On the ground, the experienced soldiers were holding spears and shields. They came to a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall and waited for the arrival of the magical beasts. These barricades were made of thick wood. They were specially placed in front of the north wall to defend against the magical beasts. After all, they couldn't really use the wall to defend against the magical beasts every time they attacked. If the attackers were humans, they wouldn't have to set up a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall. This was because humans weren't like the magical beasts who were full of weapons and full of aggressiveness. If the magical beasts were left alone, they would attack the north wall. The sheer number of magical beasts was enough to cause damage to the north wall that couldn't be repaired in time. Therefore, a barricade about 10 meters in front of the north wall was set up as a new layer of insurance. The barricade could let the soldiers' spears pass through. If the magical beasts hit the barricade, they would definitely die. Therefore, the magical beasts could only jump over the barricade. Like now. The mass-produced Ulidim and Ujar rushed to the barricade in front of the north wall because of their mobility. The long spears seemed to be waiting for the right moment, and when the magic beasts were about to reach them, they instantly shot out from the gaps in the fence. However, at this moment, the distance between the magic beast and the fence was enough for it to react. The only thing it could do was to jump over the fence that wasn't that high. However, when the magical beast jumped into the air, spears sprang up like bamboo shoots after a rain, and the spears suddenly grew out, and their positions were exactly where the magical beast was falling, sentencing the magical beast to death before it even landed on the ground. This was a tactic used by humans to deal with brainless magical beasts. One after another, the magical beasts repeated the same actions, constantly sending themselves to their deaths. Although the humans were having a harder time, they had the advantage of not suffering any casualties. However, there would always be casualties in war. There was no war without casualties, unless the time was not right. Just like now. A large number of four-legged lizard-like Musu and Hushio arrived at the front line. Due to their short legs, they were much slower than Ujar and Ulidim. However, their bodies were covered in thick scales. They could easily withstand the spears sticking out of the fence and attack the fence. Immediately after, a red, short, and thin three-headed snake darted out from Mu Xiao and Hushio's body, slithering through the gaps in the fence where the humans had placed their spears. Its spring-like body directly bit towards the humans' throats. These short, slender three-headed snakes were none other than the mass-produced magical beasts that had followed the mass-produced magical beasts to attack the temporary stronghold in the northeast, Musu Maf. However, many of the soldiers present had been through hundreds of battles, especially the soldiers at the front. They were all the veterans who had lived for half a year. Although the humans did not come up with an effective plan to deal with Musu Maf, the soldiers had figured out the characteristics of these short and thin Musu Maf. After they were ejected, they would be in a state of pause for a short while, as if the ejection had used up almost all the strength in their short and slender bodies. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the soldiers could use the spears in their hands or the swords at their waists to kill them. However, even an old horse would stumble sometimes. Due to fatigue, distraction, and various other reasons, some of the soldiers did not react in time and were bitten in the throat by the three-headed snakes. They instantly collapsed to the ground as if they had lost all their strength. Blood gushed out like a fountain. But in the next second, the three-headed snakes that had bitten the soldiers were pierced by spears and 3 of their heads were chopped off. This was done by the soldiers behind the soldiers who had fallen to the ground. The soldiers in the second row were all the veterans. No one gave any orders. When the soldiers at the front were injured or killed, the soldiers at the back had to replace them. If there were any magical beasts, they had to kill them. This was the result of the tacit understanding between the humans after fighting against the magical beasts for half a year. However, because the number of Musu Mafis was much more than what they had encountered in the past, the soldiers who had never experienced such a situation gradually felt uneasy. More and more soldiers were killed by the Musu Maf's sneak attacks. The Musu Maf also became faster and more powerful as they crashed into the fence. Moreover, due to the large number of Musu Maf, the formation of the human soldiers was disrupted. Many of the Uyghurs and Yulitim stepped on the back of the Musu Maf and jumped over the fence to reach the area between the northern wall and the fence. For a moment, the area in front of the northern wall that had been attacked by the magical beasts was filled with such scenes. Looking at this scene, Wuming furrowed his brows. However, he did not choose to take action. Instead, he continued to observe the situation quietly. Firstly, the commander of the magical beasts must be somewhere watching this scene. Wuming did not need to deal with the magical beasts in front of him. Instead, he needed to deal with the magical beast commanders that could not be replicated and posed a fatal threat to the humans. Secondly, if the humans needed the help of the gods just because of this level of attack, Wuming would be very suspicious of how the northern wall had lasted for half a year. Humans were existences with endless possibilities. How could they be captured just because of an attack of this level? Sure enough, in the next moment, the humans began to counterattack. Bang, 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 3 metallic sounds echoed throughout the northern wall. Wuming focused his gaze and saw that it was Leonidas who had climbed up the northern wall and was knocking on his shield. When the soldiers heard the 3 knocks, they didn't hesitate to retreat back into the north wall. Naturally, the magical beasts would not give up such an opportunity and began to pursue. However, in the next second, they were greeted with a rain of arrows. Chapter 955. Countless magical beasts that charged forward were covered by the rain of arrows. The larger Yulitim and Wujur were covered in arrows and couldn't be more dead. Although Mu Xiu had scales on its back, it wasn't indestructible. Its eyes, joints, and other weak points were its weak points. Under the rain of arrows, these weak points were naturally hit. The short and thin 3-headed snakes weren't spared either. After being ejected, they temporarily lost their ability to hide and could only wait for death. Only the Musu Mafu that hadn't escaped from Mu Xiu's scales were lucky enough to escape. However, there were only a few of them left and they couldn't do much. In an instant, the attacking magical beasts were all killed. Wuming couldn't help but nod his head at this scene. The rain of arrows was shot by the archers hidden in the battlements of the northern wall. Now, Wuming had completely figured out the hidden purpose of those archers. When the magical beasts attacked, the archers hid and didn't come out. It was obvious that their mission was to cover the soldiers who were fighting on the ground. When the soldiers couldn't hold on and retreated, the archers would shoot thousands of arrows and stop the magical beasts. At the same time, they would become the temporary main force and kill all the magical beasts that entered their shooting range. Moreover, because the humans retreated into the northern wall after Leonidas knocked on the shield 3 times, the archers didn't have to worry anymore and directly shot at the magical beasts. However, there were still a large number of magical beasts that flocked towards them from afar as though the rain of arrows was nothing. That was indeed the case. After all, the archers didn't have unlimited arrows. The scene of thousands of arrows being shot at the same time was only because they had enough arrows at the beginning. Gradually, the archers' arrows were used up. As though they had foreseen this scene, more and more magical beasts rushed towards the northern wall. However, Wuming saw a few divine power seals, Dinger, on the northern wall moving. It was not the Dinger that Zhuge Kongming had modified. It was just an ordinary Dinger. However, no matter how ordinary the Dinger was, it was still a powerful weapon. As if it was turned on, the Dinger made a clicking sound. The barrel rose and lengthened a lot because of the extension. The sharp cone-shaped muzzle was aimed at the sky at a certain angle. The safety at the back of the barrel was opened, and the Dinger was ready to fire. The archers were still sniping at the small number of magical beasts below the northern wall, while the Dinger was aimed at a large wave of magical beasts not far away. Dinger, fire! Following Leonidas' furious roar, the order to launch the Dinger was transmitted to the person in charge of the launch. In an instant, the rain of light that started from the center of the northern wall flew into the sky. Then, the rain of light, which was free falling due to gravity, directly hit the second wave of magical beasts as if it had predicted the attack. Asterisk boom. Asterisk although it wasn't as big as the mushroom cloud, it was still a spectacular explosion in the wilderness north of the northern wall. The second wave of magical beasts was almost completely annihilated. Then, several gates on the northern wall were opened again. Many logisticians and even soldiers came out from the gates. The soldiers went straight to the magical beasts that had escaped the net. Wuming thought that the logisticians would deal with the few human corpses, but instead, they collected the arrows shot by the archers. I see. This is a very thorough plan and cooperation. Wuming nodded and expressed his approval once again. First, the ground troops would contain the magical beasts, then the magical beasts would retreat when they broke through. Then, the long-range troops would harvest the nearby magical beasts. Finally, the Dinger would be used to finish off the magical beasts. Then, the Dinger would be used to send people to collect the arrows while the magical beasts couldn't rush over. It had to be said that this was a complete and extremely effective plan. A large number of magical beasts had been killed or injured, and although the human side had also sacrificed themselves, in terms of numbers, even if they could not be compared to the magical beasts, it was still an extremely small number. Before the next wave of magical beasts arrived, Wuming flew to the top of the wall and found Leonidas. Very good defense, Leonidas. I even suspect that if the hot spring gate had given you a more suitable geographical location, you would have been able to stop the Persian army with only 30 people. You're exaggerating, Sir Hyunryong. Leonidas knew that Wuming was just being polite. After all, Leonidas didn't think that he could stop the Persian army with only 30 people. When he tried to stop the Persian army with only 300 people, he also didn't have the confidence. But now, Sage King Gilgamesh provided Leonidas with excellent geographical and human conditions. Whether it was the North Wall or the Uruk soldiers, they played a key role in protecting the North Wall from being breached for half a year. It was like a big gear and a small gear that played a key role. And Leonidas was just the oil between the gears. By the way, what's so special about those arrows? Wuming suddenly asked. Sure enough, you found it. Leonidas said with relief. How could Wuming not find it? He didn't care about the bodies of the dead soldiers but collected the arrows first. Not to mention other things, the North Wall had the support of the Uruk, so how could there be a shortage of arrows? It was really strange. Moreover, even if there was a shortage of arrows, there was no need to be so anxious. It was obvious that he had overdone it. Unless there was a special effect on those arrows. Previously, when thousands of arrows were shot, the magic beasts were easily killed. Although they still couldn't hurt Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao, who were covered in scales, the dense arrows were still able to hurt them. Their eyes, joints and other fragile parts of their bodies were still damaged. Mu Xiao and Hu Xiao were also enhanced magic beasts, so they were easily killed. Therefore, there was an 80% to 90% chance that there was a problem with those arrows. As expected of Lord Sage Dragon. It's just as I've guessed. These arrows are special. They've all been enchanted by Lord Strategist. They're special arrows that are effective against magic beasts. The magic beasts have been enhanced 3 months ago. When facing magic beasts like Mu Xiao, Hu Xiao and Wugger, ordinary arrows couldn't completely pierce their bodies. If the arrows were ineffective, it meant that humans would lose their long-range attacks. Without long-range attacks, it would be impossible for humans to compete with the beasts. At that time, the military counselor knew about this and began to modify the arrows. Chapter 956. Since he still had some free time, Leonidas started explaining to Wu Ming. However, the ordinary arrows used by the soldiers have to be modified into enchanted arrows that can pierce through the beasts. It's troublesome and the cost isn't low. So the military advisor gave up on the idea of time-consuming and laborious. Instead, he enchanted the arrows to achieve the effect of piercing through the beasts. As long as the arrows could pierce through the beasts, then everything would be fine. As for the problem of not dealing enough damage, Leonida didn't think about it. After all, the soldiers relied on quantity to shoot arrows. As long as they could break through the defense of the demonic beasts and pierce the arrows into their bodies, then everything would be fine. The current scene was the best proof of that. Once again, Wu Ming looked at Zhuge Kongming with new eyes. Sure enough, Zhuge Kongming didn't stay idle after being summoned. He did a lot of things. However, even if it's just a light enchantment on the arrows, it's still not a small task for the military counselor. Although the military counselor modifies some of the arrows every day, in order to avoid wastage, we always collect the arrows after fighting against the magical beasts. In any case, the demonic beasts would not react to the arrows. They would neither attack nor use the arrows. Therefore, every time the demonic beasts attacked, the logisticians would retrieve the arrows while the soldiers would rest. After all, fighting against the demonic beasts would cause a lot of physical and mental fatigue. But when the number of beasts was too high, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would be needed. When the number of beasts was too high, the soldiers would listen to Leonida's orders and return to the north wall. Afterwards, the soldiers on the north wall would use the seal of divinity, Dinger, to aim at the beasts in the distance and bombard them. As for the nearby magical beasts, they were left to the archers to deal with. Alternatively, they would send melee soldiers to attack them in groups, relying on numbers to kill a single magical beast nearby. It was ironic that the beasts who had the advantage in numbers were killed by the humans. After that, the seal of divinity, Dinger, would block the beasts and create a gap in their attacks. The logistics personnel and soldiers had the opportunity to collect the arrows. At the beginning of the implementation of this strategy, the humans frequently made mistakes. After all, there were a lot of uncertainties in the strategy. For example, the speed of the beasts, where the seal of divinity, Dinger, shells should be fired to effectively block the beast's movement. There was also a series of problems that the logistics personnel couldn't efficiently collect the arrows due to the high frequency of the beast's attacks. In the end, Zhuge Kongming, as the military advisor, and Leonidas, who was in charge of the front lines, came up with an effective plan. Gilgamesh looked at it and made some changes, and this set of plans to deal with the magical beasts was settled. Moreover, because the logisticians had a recycling tool that King Gilgamesh had given them from his own treasury. The speed at which they collected the arrows wasn't slow. After Gilgamesh saw the report, he took the initiative to give the logistics personnel the tools that had the effect of collecting the arrows from his treasury. Although it's not as efficient as this king's treasury, these tools are enough for you. It will probably increase your efficiency by a few times. Go and fight the beasts for this king with gratitude. These were Gilgamesh's original words. However, the morale of the soldiers rose one by one. It had to be said that after Gilgamesh gave the tools from his treasury to the front line, it did indeed increase the efficiency of the logistics personnel in collecting the arrows. This was much more reliable than simply using the treasures as artillery shells. Standing on the north wall, Wuming looked outside. Sure enough, the logistics personnel without weapons were all carrying square boxes. They were quickly moving between the piles of arrows and the corpses of the beasts on the ground. Whenever the logistics personnel who were collecting the arrows got close to the piles of arrows, the arrows on the ground and the corpses of the beasts would automatically be collected into the boxes on their backs. There are some good things in Gilgamesh's treasury. No wonder Ishtar has been coveting it. Wuming didn't know what was in Gilgamesh's treasury. After all, the treasury didn't belong to him. He didn't need to care about what was in it. But now that he looked at it, there were some useful things in Gilgamesh's treasury. Now that he thought about it, Wuming regretted that he didn't take anything from Gilgamesh's treasury when he left Uruk. The items in his dragon's nest dimension were almost used up. The number of tools that he took from Nasrik's treasury had also decreased to the point where he could see them all at a glance. Last time, he didn't take anything from Gil. This time, should he take something from Gil? Wuming was a little conflicted. But he had to wait until everything was over before thinking about it. Right now, he had to focus on the beasts. Bang! 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 Another 3 metal collision sounds were heard. This time, Wuming could hear it clearly. Because the one who made the sound was Leonidas, who was standing beside Wuming. As if it was a signal, the soldiers and logistics personnel outside the north wall stopped their movements. They didn't care about the enchanted arrows on the ground or the corpses of the beasts. They turned and retreated towards the north wall. Because the beasts were coming again. The smoke caused by the dinger gradually dissipated. Countless beasts were rushing towards the north wall. The number of beasts was several times more than the total number of beasts that attacked before. Looking at this scene, Wuming couldn't help but frown. This wasn't a good sign. The attack of the magical beasts this time, regardless of whether it was the frequency or the number, made Wuming shocked. There were still a lot of enchanted arrows outside the north wall. If the beasts attacked like this every time, then it was only a matter of time before the north wall was broken. But if there was a beast commander, then the north wall would be broken in an instant. Seeing so many magical beasts, Leonidas decided not to let the soldiers shoot at them with their arrows. Dinger, ready. He directly ordered the soldiers to use the dinger. It was simple and crude. Fire. Along with Leonidas' order, dozens of dinger on the north wall once again fired bullets filled with magic power. Boom. 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 One after another, explosions broke out in the field outside the north wall. Because of the explosions, a cloud appeared in the eyes of the people on the north wall. This was a scene full of art if one ignored the beasts. Chapter 957. Leonidas and Wuming walked down the north wall. The demons had been bombarded by the dinger on the north wall, so they had retreated and stopped attacking. After all, the dinger was a real, mystical weapon. Even if the demons were strengthened, they would not be able to withstand it unless the demon's commander came in person. Because of this, the soldiers were able to rest for a while. Wuming and Leonida also had the opportunity to retreat from the north wall. This was because Wuming had something to discuss with Leonida. In Leonida's tent, Leonida sat on his own seat while Wuming sat on the seat next to him. The seating arrangement was requested by Wuming. He didn't put on airs, so Leonida could sit wherever he wanted. Leonidas, who had already taken off his helmet, revealed a resolute face. With his red hair, he indeed looked like a Spartan. Leonida picked up the clay jug next to him and aimed it at his mouth. He gulped down the water inside and let out a heroic sound that would make people with OCD feel very comfortable. Ah! Awesome! Leonida slammed the clay jug on the table in front of him. He looked like he was drunk as he looked at Wuming. So, Hyunryong Sama, why are you looking for me alone? Leonida's voice was full of drunkenness. This gave Wuming the feeling that Leonida was really drunk. Mesopotamia was famous for ale. When Wuming first came to the Uruk, he was worshipped with ale. It wasn't good, but it wasn't bad either. It was just average. But as long as it was wine, it could make people drunk. Even dead spirits could get drunk. Even their avatars could get drunk. To be honest, if Wuming didn't know that there was no wine in the North Wall, Wuming would have thought that Leonida was drinking in the barracks. Rumor had it that Leonidas could get drunk with just a drop of alcohol and go on a drunken rampage. Cough cough, at this moment, Wuming also became serious. I'm going to Nippur. When Wuming said this, the slightly drunk Leonida's face was no longer red. His expression also became serious. He took the clay jug off the table and put it aside. Leonida put his hands on the small table in front of him and looked at Wuming with a serious expression. Is that the gathering place of the magical beasts? Although it was in the form of a question, his tone was a statement. After all, Wuming had told him this information when he came to the North Wall. After that, without waiting for Wuming to answer him, Leonidas once again fell into a drunken stupor and started talking to himself. About 3 months ago, when the magical beast commander appeared with the strengthened magical beasts, the North Wall had already been built. Outside the North Wall, there were still a lot of people left in Nippur. They were all trying to resist the magical beasts. In order to survive, they were full of hope and were waiting for our rescue. Leonida grabbed the clay jug that was just put down next to him. He took a big gulp of water and continued to speak. As a result, on the night of the appearance of the magical beast commander, the Uruk was attacked. Since then, we haven't received any news from Nippur. It was obvious that the city gates of Nippur had been broken open by the strengthened demons and their demon's commander, and had fallen completely. A mere city was not enough in front of the magical beast commander. Nippur was outside the North Wall. If it was the current magical beasts, it would be difficult for them to resist, not to mention the existence of the magical beast commander. Wuming didn't have the intention to talk about this topic. He just quietly listened to Leonida's narration. When Leonida was almost done, Wuming began to talk. I don't know if there are other places that have become the strongholds of the magical beasts other than Nippur. I'm going to go outside the North Wall to check if there are any living humans and destroy the magical beast's lair. Wuming's last words could be considered as a response to Leonida's condolences for Nippur. Is that so? Although Leonidas thought that this method was dangerous, he didn't say anything. Wuming only came to inform Leonidas about it. After all, Wuming was not his subordinate at all. The two of them were not even on the same level. Leonida's status in Mesopotamia was much lower than Wuming's. After all, Wuming was the Hyunryong of Mesopotamia. Don't worry, I'm also a god-level servant. If I can't beat them, I can still run. If it were you, I'm afraid you would be buried in the magical beasts. Wuming's comforting words were like sarcasm, causing Leonidas's Spartan face to twitch involuntarily. However, what Wuming said was indeed true. If Wuming was there during the beheading operation, perhaps a few more servants would have survived. In that case, I won't say anything. At that moment, Leonidas stood up and picked up the clay jar on the ground. During the time when you are not in the north wall, I will guard the north wall." With that, Leonidas boldly drank the entire jar of water. This made Wu Ming feel rather helpless, but Wu Ming had to do something right now, didn't he? "Then I'll leave it to you, General Leonidas." Wu Ming picked up a bottle of water beside him and drank it without hesitation. He was no weaker than Leonidas. "Then, I'll leave first." Putting down the clay jar in his hand, Wu Ming did not say goodbye to Leonidas and went straight out of the tent. When Leonidas rushed out, he found that he couldn't find Wu Ming. At this moment, in the sky outside the north wall, Wu Ming, who relied on telekinesis to fly in the sky, headed in the direction of Nippur in his memory. He also asked Kalas to help him detect the movements of the demonic beasts so that he could avoid them and go directly to Nippur. If it was only to detect the magic reaction on the surrounding ground, Kalas could do it. Although Wu Ming and Leonidas said that they were going to see if there were any living people around, in fact, the hope of living people was directly impossible. This point, whether it was Leonidas or Wu Ming, they were very clear about. However, seeing through but not saying it out was more or less the same meaning. When the time comes, I will directly kill all the demonic beasts. It can be regarded as revenge for the people in Nippur and even the entire Mesopotamia who were sacrificed by the demonic beasts. With this in mind, Wu Ming accelerated again, and soon Wu Ming saw the shadow of Nippur. Before directly approaching Nippur, Wu Ming smelled the stench of demonic beasts and the demonic beasts that were active in Nippur. From the sky, Wu Ming could faintly see that there were red marks on the ground and walls of Nippur, and there were a lot of them. It was blood. Sure enough, it's better to directly destroy Nippur. As a god, he should also do something that was in line with God, destroying a city. Chapter 958. Wu Ming didn't have any hope for the survivors, that was for sure. But what was contradictory was that Wu Ming still had hope for the survivors. A certain righteous hero once said that when people say, "impossible," there must be a glimmer of hope in their hearts. Although Wu Ming wasn't human, he also had the same thought. So when Wu Ming saw the scene in Nippur, Wu Ming was filled with anger. There were too many red bloodstains around Nippur city, so much that it was enough to prove that there were no living people in Nippur city. Moreover, these bloodstains all indicated that what the citizens of Nippur city had experienced was a terrifying massacre brought about by magical beasts. So Wu Ming didn't want to go down to investigate the situation. Instead, he prepared to launch an attack. When the hope in a person's heart was destroyed, who wouldn't be angry? Wu Ming would be angry, but it was useless. Annihilating Nippur was the only way to save Nippur. Wu Ming believed that if the patron saint of Nippur, Enlil, was here, he would agree with Wu Ming's idea. Wu Ming waved his hand, and golden ripples suddenly emerged from Wu Ming's side. A bright white holy spear was spat out from it. This was the holy spear that Wu Ming had obtained in the country of shadows. It was made from the core branch of the world tree. Although it wasn't comparable to King Arthur's holy spear, Luin Gominad, it represented a part of the Nordic world tree, so its status wasn't low. Although it had merged and separated from Fanbaba, this spear had gone through the baptism of its origin with Wu Ming. It was no longer the same as before. Holding Yggdrasil in a reverse grip, Wu Ming raised it behind his back and pointed the tip of the spear at Nippur city diagonally below. Wu Ming began to instill magic into Yggdrasil. Wu Ming was ready to destroy Nippur completely with one attack. Kalas, correct the target and gather the mana. Yes, master. Under Wu Ming's command, Kalas, who was in a supporting magic attire, left. A few magic arrays suddenly appeared around Wu Ming and slowly gathered on Yggdrasil. The magic array could allow Wu Ming to aim at the center of Nippur more accurately. It could also gather Wu Ming's mana to prevent the mana from leaking midway, making Yggdrasil more powerful. Noble Fantas dash, in an instant, the mana in Wu Ming's body surged like a boiling ocean. Countless mana materialized and gathered on Yggdrasil and Wu Ming's hand like a decorative ribbon dancing on the spear's body. Liberated Yggdrasil seemed to have been stimulated. The shape of the tip and the end of the spear changed. Not only did it become longer and thicker, but it also became more sacred. Diagonally below, the magical beasts in Nippur, whether indoors or outdoors, all raised their heads in horror and looked in the direction of the huge manna in the sky. Their beastly instincts told them that they would probably die soon, the kind where not even dregs would be left. Yggdrasil. Wuming's eyes suddenly turned golden, and he threw Yggdrasil like a javelin. Wuming himself rose a lot because of the strong impact of Yggdrasil. The body of the Yggdrasil spear was surrounded by several auxiliary magic arrays. The colorful ribbons formed by magic power fluttered behind the end of the Yggdrasil spear. It was like a beautiful comet that was about to fall to the ground, and flew straight towards Nippur. As long as one had a discerning eye, they would be able to tell that this comet was flying towards the city center of Nippur. It seemed like it was going to hit the center of Nippur and destroy Nippur. Roar! Countless magical beasts reacted and immediately began to run for their lives. They roared in fear as if they were panicking like the citizens of Nippur. However, the comet did not have any compassion for the magical beasts and still brought God's punishment over. At this moment, the ground shook. 10 huge ferocious snake heads suddenly broke out of the ground and aimed at the comet formed by Yggdrasil. These 10 snake heads shot out purple rays. In the southwest of Mesopotamia, in the tropical rainforest formed by the authority of the feathered god, countless red magical beasts rioted in the rainforest. The magical beasts shuttled through the rainforest and constantly rubbed against the vegetation of the rainforest, causing the rainforest to rustle as if a storm was coming. Roar! These magical beasts were covered with thick and short red hair. They had no eyes, and there were some tumor-like hair where the eyes were in the back of their heads. Their tails were raised high as if they relied on their tails to search for enemies. The teeth of these magical beasts were not sharp. It was enough to tell that they did not use their teeth to bite their prey. Instead, they used their thick claws to tear their enemies apart. There were traces of flames on their claws, as if they were about to burn. This was the magical beast Oxyumugal. It was a type of magical beast that was different from Ujiel and Ulidim. However, Oxyumugal was not the only magical beast in the rainforest. There were also some carnivorous orcs with leopard heads, wolf heads, and dog heads. Roar! The orcs wielded weapons like clubs and fought fearlessly against the magical beasts that swarmed in. Although they were not as large as the strengthened magical beasts, this rainforest was their territory. They were more familiar with this place than the magical beasts. Using the geographical advantage, the orcs were able to hold their ground. They were evenly matched with the magical beasts. However, even with the perfect geographical advantage, they still couldn't beat the human advantage. Although the orcs relied on their familiarity with the terrain to contend with the magical beasts, there were simply too many magical beasts, which caused the orcs to keep retreating. If this continued, it was only a matter of time before the orcs were forced to retreat to a dead end. Of course, there was another possibility, and that was if the magical beast commander personally took action. That would be much faster. Like now. Roar, roar, roar. A roar that was even more majestic than the roar of ordinary magic beasts came from afar. The orcs could only see rows of rainforest trees falling one after another. The earth was still shaking as if some terrifying tyrant had rushed to the battlefield. Sure enough, in the next second, a huge Oxyumugal that looked similar to the other Oxyumugal but was so huge that it struck fear in the orcs appeared in front of the orcs. However, there was one difference. This huge Oxyumugal had 3 sharp horns on its head, making the huge Oxyumugal, which looked like a lion, look like a triceratops. The orcs felt the enormous magic power of this gigantic Oxyumughar and came to a conclusion without a doubt. This was the prototype of the mass-produced Oxyumughar, one of the rare beast-type Oxyumughar commanders. Roar, roar, roar. The prototype Oxyumugal roared again. This roar was mixed with a large amount of mana, and countless orcs who were close by fainted from this roar. Not only that, but the surrounding trees also collapsed one after another, forming an open space full of fallen trees. It made the entire rainforest look much more spacious and bright. Simply put, the roar of the prototype Oxyumugal could be understood as the release of magical power, sound. The roar full of magical power pushed down the orcs and the surrounding trees. Countless Oxyumugal took this opportunity to pass by the orcs and rushed into the depths of the forest. This was the intention of the prototype Oxyumugal. Their enemy was not the orcs, but the commander of the orcs' commanders. That was, the master of this rainforest, the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl. Roar! A roar like that of both a tiger and a leopard came from the depths of the rainforest. Countless magical beasts trembled and froze on the ground after hearing it. This was the innate suppression of wild beasts. The fear of wild beasts meeting more powerful wild beasts was engraved in their DNA. The Oxyumugal knew that the roar came from an existence superior to them, so they did not dare to move forward. It had to be said that this was an interesting matter. No matter what, humans could not stop the attacks of the magical beasts, but a beast that was higher in level than the magical beasts could stop them in their tracks. It could only be said that it was really interesting. The prototype Oxyumugal was not surprised at all. Its big head shook at the surrounding Oxyumugal who had stopped. Although it did not have eyes, it gave people the feeling that it was examining these mass-produced Oxyumugal. Then, the prototype Oxyumugal let out a strange roar, as if it was rather disdainful of these mass-produced magical beasts. After all, this was not the first time it had encountered such a situation. It had led these mass-produced magical beasts to raid the rainforest several times before. Almost every time, these mass-produced Oxyumugal would be frightened by the roar that sounded like both a tiger and a leopard. Although it could force these mass-produced Oxyumugars to move again, as the original Oxyumugars really didn't want to see them in such a useless state anymore. At that moment, it no longer cared about these mass-produced creatures. Anyway, it could deal with the existence that let out that sound like both a tiger and a leopard by itself, so it might as well say that it had fought with the other party several times already. Just as the prototype Oxyumugal was pondering, a yellow-striped humanoid creature suddenly jumped from the trees in the dense forest towards the prototype Oxyumugal. The toy-like claw spear in its hand flashed dangerously as it viciously stabbed at the prototype Oxyumugal. Roar! As the prototype Oxyumugal roared, the claw spear that flashed dangerously did not hit the Oxyumugal's body. Instead, it hit the three horns on the Oxyumugal's head. Clang! The sound of clashing steel resounded in the surroundings, causing the mass-produced Oxyumugal, who were originally frightened, to collectively tremble. They slowly and carefully retreated, as if they were giving way to the leopard man and the prototype Oxyumugal to fight. That's right, the one who let out that sound like both a tiger and a leopard was the leopard man, who was dressed strangely and looked like a cosplay. She was also the commander of those orcs, and the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl was her commander. However, the claw spear that was violently rubbing against the three horns of the prototype Oxyumugal showed that the leopard man was not just a figurehead. It showed that she had god-level strength, and was comparable to Tiamat's direct descendant, the 11 Sons, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, Oxyumugal. But at this moment, Oxyumugal let out a mocking sound, which made the leopard man, who was close by, rather angry. Damn it! The leopard man roared in despair, then immediately used the reaction force of Oxyumugal to jump back to the rainforest in the distance where there were still trees. Then, the leopard man hung the claw spear in her hand on a book, opened her hands and placed them on her cheeks, and shouted at the sky. Cooker! I can't beat it. Come and help me. That's right, the leopard man was actually unable to beat Oxyumugal. They seemed to be evenly matched, but that was only because Oxyumugal was not serious. In fact, when Wuming returned, Oxyumugal had been here for a long time. At that time, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, Ulidim, had actually come to support Uxiumugul, not to attack. When Wuming and Gadotsi came to the southern jungle, the reason why they did not see Quizardcoatl was because Quizardcoatl was busy dealing with Uxiumugul. The reason why the leopard man, who had led the way for Gadotsi and the others, left after bringing Gadotsi and the others here was because he needed to help Quizardcoatl deal with Uxiumugul. As for telling Gadotsi and the others, don't even think about it. Although the leopard man was not stupid, the leopard man's brain circuit was different from ordinary people and even ordinary servants. It was very similar to those berserkers. It was already good enough that she could go back to support Quizardcoatl. It was basically impossible to expect her to report the information. If Wuming was there at that time, maybe she could ask. Unfortunately, Wuming was not there at that time. When Wuming and Gadotsi met up, the leopard man had already left. Moreover, because Uxiumugul, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, attacked the southwest part of the jungle, which was quite a distance away from Wuming and Gadotsi. So, whether it was Wuming or Chaldea, they did not notice that Uxiumugul, one of the commanders of the magical beasts, was constantly attacking the jungle. At that time, the information that Merlin had obtained from Ulidim's mind was incomplete. As a result, the original Uxiumugul, one of the commanders of the magic beasts, had been staying near the southwest part of the southern forest to harass and attack the forest. He had really missed a good opportunity to retreat early. After that, the Uxiumugul had been attacking the forest intermittently until now. Chapter 959. The original plan of the monster commanders was to let the monster commanders lead an unimaginable number of monsters to attack the Uruk from all directions of Mesopotamia. Ulidim and Uxiumughar would attack Quizardcoatl from the southwest, the Kururu would land from the southeast, Muzamaf and Ujar would mount a surprise attack from the northwest, and finally, Basumu and the mysterious existence using Enkidu's body would launch a frontal attack from the north. There were a total of 4 directions to encircle the Uruk. This was the plan formulated by the monster commanders after losing 4 monster commanders. The original plan was to use Uxiumughar and Ulidim, who were responsible for attacking the southwest, to launch an attack on Quizardcoatl as a fuse to temporarily contain Quizardcoatl. If possible, they would attract the attention of the Uruk side as much as possible. When the Uruk side's attention was diverted to this side, the other monster commanders would launch a joint attack from the Persian Gulf, Mount Abif, and the north to capture the Uruk in one fell swoop. After that, they would besiege Quizardcoatl. As a result, Ulidim, who went to the southwest jungle to support Uxiumughar, was bumped into by Wuming halfway. Moreover, he overestimated himself and wanted to devour Wuming. In the end, he was killed by Wuming and was forced to retreat. In this way, only Uxiumughar was left as a monster commander in the southwest, and the plan to use him as a fuse to trigger the final battle had to be changed. The monsters had some kind of special connection with each other. If any monster commander died, the other monster commanders could sense it. The reason why the 10 servants in the previous decapitation operation were discovered so quickly was precisely because of this. In short, after Ulidim died, the monsters immediately changed their plan. They let Uxiumughar continue to contain Quizardcoatl, and let Muzamaf and Ujar's monster army cross the mountains and go straight to the Uruk. At that time, the monsters in the north and the Persian Gulf could still temporarily ignore Quizardcoatl and take down the Uruk. However, at that time, Muzamaf and Ujar encountered Ishtar, who was pulled into the group by Wuming. After being replenished by Wuming's command spell, Ishtar, who was full of resentment, activated her noble phantasm and directly bombarded the monster army to the point that not even ashes were left. The 2 monster commanders, Muzamaf and Ujar, also fell into the underworld. In the end, Ujar was killed by the goddess of the underworld, and Muzamaf took the opportunity to escape. Quizardcoatl, who was located in the jungle, needed to be contained, so even if they couldn't use it as a fuse, it didn't matter. However, if Ujar and Muzamaf failed, it would really be a big crisis. Ishtar's golden star explosion penetrated the underworld, and directly became impassable. On the other hand, the monsters in the Persian Gulf were weak, and as a fuse, it seemed a bit unreliable and easy to be targeted by the humans. As a result, after a long time, they could only continue to attack from the north. When the monsters in the north were ready to attack, the monsters in the Persian Gulf also moved at the same time. After all, even if they couldn't surround the Uruk from all directions, attacking the Uruk from the north and the south at the same time was also a good choice. As the saying goes, the worst thing in a team battle is to lose the backline. When the beasts appear in the Persian Gulf, Uruk's side will definitely become anxious, and the whole battle will definitely become advantageous to the beasts. However, Ujar, who was unwilling to be treated as a leftover material, took the initiative to attack the jungle. This attack could be said to be his biggest attack since coming to the jungle in the south. As a beast-shaped magical beast commander, Wushu Mughal's physique was even stronger than those human-shaped magical beast commanders. This was because Wushu Mughal had retained the essence of a wild beast. When faced with a hostile human or a beast, which was more terrifying, it was believed that basically everyone would say that the beast was the beast, because the beast's attack was not logical, that is, unexpected. Especially in a battle to the death, the intelligent human would often think of a way out, while the beast would pay attention to what was in front of them. The monster commanders in the human form also had such a drawback. They had the drawbacks that belonged to humans, and not only that. Even though the magical beast commanders were all magical beasts and enemies of humans, once they gained intelligence and had decent intelligence, it was inevitable that they would fall into the same lowly circle as humans, and that was forming cliques. Based on their appearance, the monster commanders were divided into human form and beast form. The humanoid magical beast commander believed that it was different from the mass-produced magical beasts and was superior to them. Moreover, the humanoid magical beast commander was indeed more in line with the term commander, unlike the pure magical beasts that were categorized as wild beasts. On the other hand, the monster commanders in the beast form believed that the beast form was the form of the monsters superior, and they should not be proud of being different from other monsters. Similarly, the monster commanders in the beast form retained the essence of a beast. Compared to a commander, they were more like monsters. It had to be said that this was rather ironic, because it was very much like the so-called pro-emperor faction and pro-people faction. Those humanoid magical beast commanders boasted of their arrogance, and they made up the majority of the 11 magical beast commanders. Add to that the fact that some of the beast-type magical beast commanders didn't do anything, and some even switched sides, it could be said that the humanoid magical beast commanders looked down on beast-type magical beast commanders like Ualidim, and the lion-headed magical beast commander Ualidim was a classic example among classic examples. The kobold Ualidim had overestimated himself and wanted to devour Wuming. The lion-headed Ualidim had also thought that the goddess of the underworld would not be able to do anything to him, but in the end, they had both been killed. Their deaths were caused by the common flaw of the monster commanders in the human form. Wuming's multiple spells did not kill Ualidim, and Ereshkigal also had to expend some effort to kill Ualidim. From this, it could be seen that the two of them were indeed quite capable. If they had been more careful, they might not have left so easily. When they evolved into human form, they also inherited the weaknesses of humans. Arrogance, conceit, self-conceit, thinking that they had done something, and so on. And it was precisely these weaknesses that harmed them. Ualidim and Ualidim were the best examples. As for the fact that they looked down on the beast form magical beast commanders, although they didn't show it, all the magical beast commanders were well aware of it. Moreover, the best example was the reason why Wushu Mughar had brought those brainless mass-produced Wushu Mughar to the southwest border alone to deal with Quetzalcoatl. It was obvious that Ualidim had been isolated. Chapter 960. As for the fact that they looked down on the beast-form demonic beast commanders, although they didn't show it, all the demonic beast commanders were well aware of it. Moreover, the reason why Mughar alone brought those brainless mass-produced Mughar to the southwest border to deal with Quetzalcoatl was the best example. It was clear that Mughar had been isolated. Traveling from the northernmost fir forest to the southernmost forest, and being the fuse to launch the attack, this kind of tiring work could only be done by the unpopular beast-form demonic beast commanders. And it just so happened that Mughar had the strength and was also a beast-form demonic beast commander. No matter what, he was fully qualified to come to the southwest border. But Mughar probably didn't have good intentions for rushing over. The reason why Mughar rushed over was probably because he needed to be the supervisor of the beast-form demonic beast commander, just like the combination of Mughar and Mughar. However, Mughar was the beast-form demonic beast commander who had switched sides. Although he didn't express it clearly, Muzamath, who was also a beast-type magical beast commander, had the intention of defecting to the side of the human-type magical beast commander. This made Mughal, who had noticed this, feel extremely displeased. This was enough to show that the beast-form demonic beast commander's camp was far inferior to the human-form demonic beast commander's camp. Not only that, the reason why Mughar and Hughar led their mass-produced Mughar and Hughar to raid the Uruk was also because of the instigation, sarcasm, and ridicule of the human-form demonic beast commanders. The main purpose of this matter was to test the fighting strength of the Uruk. Apart from that, it was also to make the beast-form demonic beast commanders sacrifice one of their members, thus weakening the strength of the beast-form demonic beast commanders. Although the beast-form demonic beast commanders, Mughar and Hughar were the first to die, the human-form demonic beast commanders also suffered many casualties. For example, the scorpion man Kutabliru and the bull Kusalik both died in the hands of the servant summoned by the human side, while the kobold Mughar and the lion Mughar were also killed. Currently, there were only 2 human-form demonic beast commanders left. Although the beast-form demonic beast commanders didn't do anything and had the intention of switching sides, even so, the advantage of the beast-form demonic beast commanders was highlighted. Thinking of this, coupled with the current situation of personally participating in the battlefield, Mughar felt even more delighted. The human-form demonic beast commanders liked to command, while the beast-form demonic beast commanders preferred to personally participate. Mughar and Hughar and Ugur and Wuming's attacks were probing attacks first. Mughar. If it were Mughar, he would definitely choose to ambush and kill Hughar at the right time, unlike Mughar. Of course, trash like the orcs in this forest couldn't arouse Mughar's interest at all. Only existences like the leopard man could slightly arouse Mughar's interest. As for the feathered serpent god, Quetzalcoatl, Wushu Mughar was even more interested in him. Quetzalcoatl was an opponent who was on par with him, or even stronger than him. But this didn't mean that he would be killed in an instant. He had fought with the Quetzalcoatl several times. Although he retreated first every time, he gradually became familiar with Quetzalcoatl's attacking style. The Quetzalcoatl goddess possessed strength that wasn't inferior to the mother goddess. Her fighting style was also as wild as a beast's. But that wasn't important. In short, the wildness of the human body was vividly displayed by the Quetzalcoatl goddess. At this thought, Mughar's blood couldn't help but boil. Roar, roar, roar. Mughar once again let out a roar filled with magic. This was a declaration of war against the enemy. And the wild-natured Quetzalcoatl goddess Quetzalcoatl naturally couldn't ignore Mughar's declaration of war. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. An object that Mughar couldn't see clearly spun and whisked towards Mughar. However, Mughar didn't need to see it. He had fought with Quetzalcoatl several times before, so even if he couldn't see it, he already knew what it was. It was Quetzalcoatl's weapon. Clang! Mughar caught it with the 3 horns on his head and stuck it firmly in the middle of his 3 horns. After all, this was an old opponent, so he wouldn't be hit by this move again. But then, another blurry existence flew over. It was an existence even bigger than the weapon. It was a human figure. It was Quetzalcoatl. Ah! Quetzalcoatl's foot landed hard on Oxyamughar's head, and it happened to hit Quetzalcoatl's own weapon. The powerful impact instantly kicked the handle of Quetzalcoatl's weapon, which was stuck between Oxyamughar's 3 horns. This kick caused the atmosphere to tremble, and Oxyamaghar couldn't help but kneel down. Boom! Taking advantage of Oxyamughar's temporary powerlessness, Quetzalcoatl instantly picked up her weapon and jumped back to the leopard man's side. Oxyamaghar slowly stood up from the extremely short period of powerlessness. This bit of damage wasn't enough to cause the slightest bit of damage to his powerful body. Crack! But at this moment, one of the 3 horns on Oxyamughar's head made a cracking sound. This stunned Oxyamaghar. Then, Oxyamughar's horn broke and fell to the ground in front of him. After fighting with you so many times, I've more or less figured out your fighting style. Quetzalcoatl said to Oxyamaghar in a lively and cheerful voice like a big sister next door. Oxyamaghar and Quetzalcoatl had fought a few times, and similarly, Quetzalcoatl had also fought with Oxyamaghar before. This was something that anyone could figure out. Since Oxyamaghar could analyze Quetzalcoatl from these few fights, there was no reason why Quetzalcoatl couldn't analyze Oxyamaghar, right? And this time, Quetzalcoatl broke Oxyamughar's horn because of Quetzalcoatl's analysis of Oxyamaghar. But this time, Oxyamaghar was completely furious. Chapter 961. Oxyamughar's body was quite tough. No matter how Quetzalcoatl hammered and wrestled, she could not cause any obvious damage to Oxyamaghar because his body took all the hits. This was the strength of a demonic beast commander. Their physical fitness was ridiculously high. As a beast-type demonic beast commander, Oxyamughar's physical fitness was even higher than that of other humanoid demonic beast commanders. If it had to be expressed in terms of data, Oxyamughar's durability might have reached the EX level. However, although Oxyamaghar could withstand Quetzalcoatl's attacks, the pain was still transmitted to his mind. Being able to withstand hits did not mean that it did not hurt. These were 2 different things. As one of the 3 goddesses, although Quetzalcoatl's attacks could not directly cause harm to Oxyamaghar, who had an extremely high physical fitness, she could indirectly cause harm to him. It was precisely because the indirect damage accumulated to a certain extent that Oxyamaghar retreated. While Quetzalcoatl's attacks did not have much effect on Oxyamaghar, Oxyamughar's attacks did not have much effect on Quetzalcoatl because he really could not catch up to her. Coupled with the terrain of the rainforest and his high agility, Oxyamaghar, who was constantly under attack, was the first to retreat every time. But both sides could not afford to waste time like this. Whether it was Oxyamaghar or Quetzalcoatl, both sides were looking for each other's weaknesses. The first to act was Quetzalcoatl. Since she could not cause harm to Oxyamughar's tough body, she would attack the less tough parts. Quetzalcoatl aimed at the 3 horns on Oxyamughar's head. The 3 horns of Oxyamaghar, who was known as the Triceratops, were naturally not ordinary horns. Whether it was in terms of sharpness or toughness, they were comparable to the so-called divine weapons, just like Quetzalcoatl's weapon, Makana. But there was a principle that Oxyamaghar did not understand, and that was the so-called overly tough makes it easy to break. Coincidentally, Quetzalcoatl understood this principle. Quetzalcoatl used her own weapon, Makana, in combination with her wrestling skills. Through the contrast of using softness to overcome toughness, she successfully kicked one of Oxyamughar's horns off. Or rather, it was cut off by the vibration of the saw blade. While Oxyamaghar was proud of his 3 horns, he also valued them very much. This was just like how many people valued their hairstyle. To Oxyamaghar, these 3 horns were even more important than a damaged hairstyle. After all, the 3 horns were the proof of Oxyamughar's strength. Quetzalcoatl, who had broken one of Oxyamughar's horns, had undoubtedly infuriated Oxyamughar. Roar, roar, roar. Ignoring the remaining mass-produced Oxyamughar and the surroundings, the original Oxyamughar completely let the flow of magic in his body flow freely. A huge amount of magic mixed with this extremely high decibel roar spread in all directions. Many collapsed trees on the ground were shattered by the sound waves, and countless orcs and magical beasts were also affected by the roar. Their bodies directly exploded, and the scene became extremely bloody. Quizard-Coil's expression only changed and she frowned. She was not affected much, but the leopard man could not take it anymore. He covered his ears and fell from the tree. Gadotsi and the others, who had rushed over from behind, also heard the roar. Gadotsi, who was careless, directly knelt on the ground, holding her head as if it was about to split open. Matthew immediately raised his shield in front of Gadotsi. Moreover, the communication between Chaldea and Gadotsi even fluctuated, and thus became unstable. Tachika, that's, waving official, Hart, Roman, who was in Chaldea, only said a few vague words, and the communication was cut off. Hey, hey. Doctor. Dear Leonardo da Vinci. Gadotsi knelt on the ground, holding her head with one hand and looking at the communication device on her wrist with the other. She shouted for Chaldea, but no one picked up. This voice is full of magic. It seems that the roar just now cut off the connection between you and Chaldea, Merlin said as he helped Gadotsi, who was half kneeling on the ground, up. It seems like that's the case. Gadotsi was a little helpless. How could the connection between her and Chaldea always be cut off? This once again showed that Chaldea's equipment was slightly unreliable. Matthew, who was standing in front of Gadotsi and holding his shield to block the sound waves, turned to look at Gadotsi. Senior, what should we do now? Matthew used magic defense, which was similar to a magic release skill, to buff his shield and block the sound waves. There's no other way. Let's wait for the sound waves to stop before we go and take a look. This time, they flew to the city in the dense forest in a pterosaur that could carry people. After being drawn to the human side by Wuming, Quizard-Coil placed several large pterosaurs in the Uruk for the Uruk to perform emergency tasks, such as supporting a certain place. However, they did not expect that the first use of the pterosaurs placed in the Uruk by Quizard-Coil would be to support Quizard-Coil herself. Gilgamesh ordered Siduri to use the pterosaurs to bring Chaldea's people to the dense forest in the southwest. After receiving Quizard-Coil's order, the pterosaurs would recognize the aura of a few people and treat them as half-masters. Siduri was one of them. That was why Gilgamesh asked Siduri to bring Gadotsi and the others here. Just now, while the demonic beasts were resting, Quizard-Coil went to greet Chaldea's people and finally let Chaldea's people see the Quetzalcoatl goddess of the Three Goddesses Alliance. After that, the demonic beasts attacked again. The leopard man was the first to attack, followed by Quizard-Coatl. Gadotsi and the others who were slower than the two were left behind. By the way, Fufu was carried by Siduri and left in Eridu. Fortunately, Gadotsi and the others were left behind. Otherwise, if they had to bear the sound waves at such a close distance, Gadotsi would definitely not be able to withstand it. Even if she was lucky enough not to die, she would have fainted. Gadotsi was not a brainless protagonist in a hot-blooded manga. She was self-aware. Even if she could not help, she would not be a burden. That was why she proposed to wait for the sound waves to dissipate. Chapter 962. Although Gadotsi was worried about the feathered serpent god and the leopard man, she couldn't risk her life. Moreover, her decision would affect more than just her. Matthew, Merlin, and Anna would all be affected. As Gadotsi's descendant, Matthew would definitely support Gadotsi's decision. As for Merlin's words, it was best to leave them out for the time being. Anna doesn't have any objections, right? After that, Gadotsi looked at Anna, who had taken off her hood for some reason. Oh. Yeah. I'm fine with it. Anna's face turned red. She was obviously embarrassed to take off her hood in front of so many people. I heard that Anna often helps out at a flower shop. It seems that Anna has been interacting well with others in the Uruk. She doesn't wear a hood to cover her face anymore. Big brother Merlin, I'm really happy. Merlin took the opportunity to tease Anna. However, Anna immediately turned her head and glared at Merlin as if he was a cockroach. Then, Anna put her hood back on her head and raised the undying slaughter blade in her hand. It seemed like she wanted to slash Merlin with her scythe. It seemed that Anna wasn't joking. In order to prevent the existence of an ally, Merlin, from being slashed, Gadotsi immediately mediated and changed the topic. Speaking of which, the roar that's still radiating sound waves should be from the demonic beast commander, right? Since there was no way to continue approaching the leopard man and the feathered serpent god, Gadotsi wanted to organize the information first. Merlin, who had been in Uruk for half a year and had almost become a local, replied to Gadotsi, "That's right. To be able to let out such a roar, there's no one else other than the demon commander. I reckon that the demon commander is probably Oxyumughar, who has the nickname of Triceratops." The main reason was that the magical beast commanders who could make such a roar were basically all dead. Apart from Oxyumughar, there was no other type of magical beast commander that could make such a roar. After all, the other magical beast commanders were not of the right type, so it could only be Oxyumughar. So the magical beast commander is this powerful. Gadotsi couldn't help but look in the direction where the sound waves were still coming from. After today's experience, Gadotsi had a new understanding of the demonic beast commander, which was definitely stronger than most of the servants. Moreover, the roar of the commander of the beasts could make Gadotsi almost fall into a coma. If the commanders of the beasts attacked the north wall together, then would the north wall be able to persist until now? Gadotsi had such doubts. Merlin, who saw the doubts in Gadotsi's eyes, acted as a caring big brother. "Indeed, this is very strange for you, Fujimaru." Walking to the side of the clean ground, Merlin sat cross-legged with the staff in his hand, and then continued to speak. "So, Fujimaru, what do you think is the ultimate goal of the beasts? Who is the enemy of the beasts? Isn't it to destroy the humans and seize the Uruk's holy grail?" Gadotsi didn't think and directly blurted out. To be honest, she felt that Merlin's question was full of questions. Wasn't Gorgon's purpose already clear? Is that really the case? Merlin could not help but smile. So, if the humans are wiped out and the Holy Grail and King Gilgamesh's treasury is in their hands, will Gorgon really win? Is it not? Gadotsi was completely confused. Wasn't Gorgon's purpose to destroy the humans? Destroy the humans of this era and seize the Holy Grail and Gilgamesh's treasury. In this way, the reason of humanity will be destroyed. However, at this moment, Anna suddenly spoke. The other two goddesses will not allow Gorgon to do this. Seeing that everyone's attention had been attracted, Anna couldn't help but tighten her hood and didn't say anything else. Just as Anna said, the other two goddesses in the three goddesses alliance will not allow it. Merlin spread out his hands. The three goddesses alliance is nominally a joint attack on the Uruk and humans, but in fact, it is a contract made by the three parties to restrain each other. In other words, the three goddesses alliance was not an alliance from the beginning, but an enemy relationship. Gadotsi nodded. The three parties will temporarily stop fighting with each other and use their own methods to take down the Uruk without affecting the other two goddesses. The winner will have the ownership of this land. However, whether it is Gorgon, Ereshkigal, or even Quetzalcoatl, they will not really give up. After that, the three parties will definitely start fighting again to see who will finally obtain the ownership of this land. Gorgon is only accumulating strength to deal with the other two goddesses. That's right, destroying the humans and Mesopotamia is only Gorgon's idea. Whether it is Ereshkigal or Quetzalcoatl, they do not have the idea of destroying the humans and Mesopotamia. Then, Merlin briefly explained Gorgon's general plan. For Gorgon, the humans are not the enemy, but the pests that need to be destroyed. The real enemy is the other two goddesses. Therefore, the magical beast commanders think that the humans are in the bag and do not need to deal with them too seriously. They only need to deal with the humans slowly and wait for the magical beasts to reproduce. When the magical beasts reach a certain number, they can destroy the humans and the other two goddesses together. Gorgon cannot directly attack Quetzalcoatl, but he can use the magical beast commanders under his command to contain the Uruk. After that, when the other magical beast commanders break through the Uruk and obtain the Uruk, the contract of the three goddesses will naturally collapse. At that time, Gorgon will naturally besiege Quetzalcoatl with several magical beast commanders, and the Quetzalcoatl will definitely be in the bag. As for Ereshkigal, she can't leave the underworld at all. She can be dealt with lashed, or not at all. Anyway, Gorgon's purpose is to destroy Mesopotamia. If Ereshkigal can't come to the surface to affect her, then Gorgon will not care at all. She only needs to destroy the humans on the surface. That's about it. Merlin nodded with satisfaction at his speech. Wait a minute, Mr. Merlin. Matthew, who was still carrying the shield, could not help but turn his head to look at Merlin. It can't be helped. Merlin's speech is too shocking. How do you know about the magical beast's plan? Chapter 963. Gadotsi grabbed Merlin's neck and made a sound full of surprise. Let go. It's broken. It's going to break. Merlin rolled his eyes. For some reason, Gadotsi's excitement made him so strong that Merlin, a servant, could not break free. Gadotsi, who realized the problem, immediately let go of Merlin and apologized shyly. Sorry. Cough, cough, cough. Merlin, who was lying on the ground, touched his chest and couldn't help but sigh. I'm saved. Merlin, don't change the topic. Annis said while putting Harpa's scythe under Merlin's neck. Calm down, Anna. Are you going to kill me? Merlin was so scared that he didn't dare to move. This immortal slaughtering blade had a special effect on immortal creatures. Although Merlin had relied on half of the dream demon bloodline to survive, he did not want to gamble on whether he was considered an immortal creature or not. Whether the scythe would have any effect on him, he did not want to take the risk at all. He did not want to suffer such a blow. Merlin was very afraid of pain. Even when he bit his tongue while chanting, he would feel pain for a while. I can now cut you down as if you're in cahoots with the demonic beasts. What else do you want to say? Anna's small and cold voice was a little bit cold. Looking at Anna's eyes that were filled with coldness, Merlin could feel that if he did not explain himself clearly, Anna would really slash him with a knife. After all, Anna wanted to cut Merlin for a while, so she could take this opportunity to get rid of him. All of this is my own speculation. I extracted some information from one of the commanders of the demons, Ulidim. In addition, Quizzer, who is also a member of the Three Goddesses Alliance with Gorgon, told me something. That's why I was able to speculate. In order to prevent people from not understanding, Merlin explained in detail. After all, the plan made by the demonic beast commanders is not a top-secret plan. As long as you know that the demonic beasts will attack the Uruk from different places, then this plan will become an easy-to-understand open conspiracy. Merlin raised his hands and kept a surrendering look. Anna, can you move this away from my neck? Merlin looked at Anna with a smile and moved Harpa's scythe with his hand. You escaped. Anna said and took back the scythe from Merlin's neck. When Merlin finally calmed down, Gadotsi discovered something. Wait a minute, Merlin, in other words, assassin also knows. After all, Wuming was the one who killed Ulidim. Since Merlin could extract information from Ulidim, there was no reason that Wuming didn't know about it. Yes, that's it. Merlin patted his sleeves and put his hand on his forehead to observe. The sound wave has almost stopped, let's go. Merlin finished and strode forward. Wait a minute. Merlin, why didn't Assassin and you tell us such important information earlier? Gadotsi, who quickly followed Merlin, asked Merlin loudly. Varen Senpai's words probably have his own reasons. Mashu, who had put away her shield, walked to Gadotsi's side and said her opinion. That's right. After all, the number of demonic beasts commanders has changed, so the demonic beasts' plan will inevitably change. Villo just reserved his opinion. But Merlin, it must be because of his bad taste. Anna followed behind the three and looked at Merlin with disdain. Ah, that's too much, Anna. But Anna answered Merlin seriously. Go to hell, Merlin. Yes. Matthew, who couldn't stand it anymore, interrupted the conversation between the two. The battlefield is in front. Is it really okay to be so casual? Forget it, Matthew, don't worry about Merlin. After all, Gadotsi and the others already knew about Merlin's indecent behavior. Yes, Senior. But, I don't know how Assassin and the North Wall are doing now, I'm so worried. Miss Gadotsi, who was distracted after saying that Merlin was indecent. At that moment, Matthew could only remain silent. But that feeling of helplessness filled Matthew's face. This way, there really isn't a problem, right? Outside the North Wall, in the sky above Nippur City. Wuming silently looked at the ray that deflected his noble phantasm's attack, and his face turned pale. Before his Yggdrasil hit Nippur City, it was deflected by the rays released by a few giant snake heads that suddenly emerged from the hills of Nippur City. As a result, Yggdrasil only hit half of Nippur City, and half of the demonic beasts seemed to have received an order to gather on the other half of Nippur City. This caused basically no demonic beasts to be killed by this noble phantasm. Yggdrasil landed on the ground and caused a huge explosion. The smoke was dispersed by the natural wind towards the other half of Nippur City, and the dispersed Nippur City was full of mystery. He grabbed Yggdrasil, who had automatically flown back from the ground, and with a swing of his spear, he put Yggdrasil back into his dragonish space. This is not good, Callis, how are your preparations going? I still need some time, Master. Hearing Callis's words, Wuming gave up on a certain idea. If that's the case, let me think of a way to get through this by myself. The difficulty that Wuming was talking about was the few huge snakeheads that had shot Yggdrasil's ray that deviated from its course. Wuming had seen those snakeheads before. They were formed by Gorgon's hair. Wuming had been in close contact with Gorgon last time, so he definitely would not be mistaken. An ethereal voice like that of a god echoed in the sky as if it came from all directions. Wuming clearly recognized that the voice came from Nippur City below. It was just that the other party had used magic to make the voice sound like it came from all directions. However, Wuming was very confused about the voice. From the sound of it, it seemed to be Gorgon's voice, but Gorgon would not make such meaningless shouts. Gorgon, just half a year shouldn't be enough for you to recover from your injuries. After all, Gorgon said that she would not step out of her blood shrine until she recovered from her injuries. Wuming was also very clear that even if Gorgon had the Holy Grail, it was impossible for her to recover from her injuries in such a short period of time. This was because the injuries that Wuming inflicted on Gorgon were caused by his origin force. For Gorgon, who had the origin black soil, Wuming's attack went deep into his bones. The magic provided by the Holy Grail that Gydia created was not enough to heal him. If that was the case, why did Gorgon come here? Why did he make that song-like sound?